Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Voices of Orion Project. I'm here with my partner, Dean Seven-Alon, and we have a very special guest tonight. She is the author of 2 books, The Dark Side of Cupid, Love Affairs and the Supernatural, and Energy Vampirism and the Love Bite, Alien Interference in Human Love Relationships. She's an anonymous trauma consultant, an experiencer herself, and somebody I deeply respect and admire. And without further ado, here's Eve Lorgen.
Oh, hello. It's nice to be on your show, Nathan. And I've heard a couple of your videos, and the recent one you did with Courtney Brown, and that was fantastic, but I didn't finish it all. But I'm really glad that this is really starting to come center stage, actually, with a lot more things being disclosed that were kind of kept hidden for a while. So I know that your experiences have been the kind of thing that were more kept hidden, or people really don't want to know about some of the deeper, darker kind of stuff. And this is something that actually I found in my early work when I started doing a support group and really working with people with Barbara Bartholic and James Bartley. And we just kind of discovered all this stuff happenstance, but we discovered the MILAB and the reptilian and some of the, what I called the spiritual warfare elements, and then how they were setting up people in love obsession relationships or pulling them apart, or trying to prevent people from coming out and sharing information about what was really happening. So there was obviously something going on that was trying to prevent people from saying the whole thing about certain aspects of the phenomena, or trying to corral it into a narrative of where people wanted to go that made them feel better about what they thought they were experiencing. So I don't know if you found that out too.
I found it out the hard way, actually. I've had several of those love bite sort of scenarios take place in my life. It really does drive a wedge between you and your spouse, especially when it happens. And there's something that they can't understand unless they're an experiencer themselves. And even then, it's a difficult pill to swallow.
Yeah, it sounds nuts. It absolutely sounds nuts. And I know it does. But when I was so lucky, I felt very fortunate to be in correspondence with Barbara Bartholic, and the late Dr. Carla Turner had written about it in the Ted Rice case and the Masquerade of Angels. And then we got to talking about it because there were so many similar things that we were finding out in our private experiences and talking to people at conferences in the back rooms and stuff, finding out, all this stuff. And then that's when me and James Bartley were corresponding closely with Barbara Bartholic, who did a lot of hypnotic regressions on abductees. And a lot of this stuff really wasn't well published or spoken about in the community. So we got a bird's eye view of all the deep other stuff that was going on that people weren't really talking about. So, and it vindicated a lot of what we were experiencing. And had I not really known about this phenomena of, quote, the alien interference with what she called it, the orchestration of the drama of the love obsession, where the alien handlers would actually set people up. Sometimes they were both abductees, or the other targeted partner could have been someone they just picked up for one reason or another for the purpose of setting someone else up. And it would have a very dramatic effect, on the person, like a true love obsession. And then the paranormal and the psychic connections and the high drama and the whole thing that I talked about in my book, which carried a type of pattern that was distinguishable, like, oh my God, that sounds like a love bite. And if people remembered their experiences, then we're able to piece things together. So that's really, that book has been over 20 years old now, but certainly still happens. And I think people don't really want to, I think people want to think they meet their twin flame or their soulmate, and they're not really clear about what's happening deep down underneath. And so a lot of the clients that I get now for anomalous trauma tend to revolve around a relationship that they're not sure about. They think they might have had something with a twin flame or a soulmate, but it had unusual characteristics, and they're maybe recovering from it several years later, or in the process of getting into it with the astral dynamics and all that. So I actually get more clients who have more of the relationship issues and the supernatural paranormal kind of trauma. So in the beginning, though, I actually wanted to become a therapist to work more with alien abductions and also just regular family trauma. So in the beginning, I did more with the whole alien abduction scenario, and then the MILAB stuff that was really just opening up. We didn't even know about the secret space program and the 20 and back in the old days until they started coming forth. So I guess what happens as a therapist, though, and a researcher, that once I specialize in a certain area, then most of my clients end up people who really want to work on the traumas of a relationship issue that might be related to something that was set up, or where there was an attached entity, or what I call it, entity attachment, where there was a vampirism kind of loose feeding manipulation thing going on, or astral connections and that kind of thing. So now I really don't do like regressions with contactees and abductees and all the other stuff. It's just now it's just really trauma counseling, to be honest. So
yeah, that's something that's sorely needed. It's something that's quite absent. Have you ever heard of not just the love bite scenario, but when they introduce what are supposed to be either some type of spiritual family member or an extraterrestrial family member component? Because I also had those too. Have you heard anybody talk about that?
well, yeah, sometimes they think they have a entity that they're connected to, or a past life thing, or or they have another counterpart in another form that they're connected to in another life, like parallel life kind of thing.
Yeah, well, the situation I had was that it was members of a cult. I referred to that Enki cult, the Joy of Satan, which uses Satanism as psychological camouflage to kind of hide it, and it really does a good job of it. But when I got into that, which was something I was subconsciously programmed to go into as part of this program that I've identified as Project Ibis, they introduced me to people like almost right away. As soon as I mentioned a certain story about myself, it's had to do with what I understood to be the soul transference memory, which turned out to be from a military base. I had people come and recruit me into a spiritual warfare group, and then immediately I met someone that I later identified, just recently identified as being somebody that was in one of the programs with me, and some kind of arranged relationship type scenario, type situation. And then, of course, I met a woman named Sherry Smith, who lived not far, well, about 80 or 90 miles south of me. And her and her son are both what I've identified to be some kind of MILAB victim connected to this program. And I was lied, and she was lied to, and we were told that we were actually family members. So, even though, I mean, we felt a connection, but it was more of a connection because of what we were going through and whatever else they were programming into us. But they had me thinking all sorts of things. I was trying to analyze the soul transference memory, and I was looking at aspects of it, and I was getting false feedback from this AI entity that was supposed to be my Hajian wife, which actually later came into the picture and acted completely different and was there for a whole different purpose. And what I was dealing with was something apparently a product of AI intelligence, transdimensional AI intelligence that they've put around this planet. Part of the whole spirit guide sort of scenario, because it was an inversion of that. It was instead of spirit guides, you had like you had these like spiritual entities that were supposed to be extraterrestrials, but they were also connected to the King Solomon mythos, or if that's even a mythos, the 72 watchers. So you would go through this ritual thing where you would actually what it was is you held a pendulum over top of a sheet of paper, and it had all the different sigils on it. And when you got to the one that spun, that's when the contact began. With me, it was a little bit different. I was getting, these psychic visions of hands coming for me out of like a void. There's things going on, and eventually it just became like a group contactee scenario before I got out of it about 7 months later, at which point it became completely personal. And that's why I left, because I could not relate to the other people from a theological point of view. And I wasn't really that into the theology itself either, because it had that there was the satanic theme, but there was also a heavy Nazism involved too, which seemed to be an element from the programs in these secret space programs and so forth.
Oh, Nazi thing. Yeah. You know, it reminds me of something that I don't want to say who it happened to. I'll just say that what I found is that, let's say if people were in a program, they're a MILAB, and they're starting to wake up and they want to process their memories. And then a lot of times that's when, let's say, an interference factor comes in, where it's a group or a person, or maybe a love bitey thing where you feel a connection with someone. It could be a guru. It could be, you know, someone you feel a strong attraction to, and then you meet with them in the astral, and they may have a group. And sometimes it's a way to capture you and to entrap you into handling, so that they become like a new handler, or they
Right.
basically keep you from really discovering deeper truths about yourself, to really actually do a thorough recovery and a freedom from the program. So I actually discovered this with a group that, you know, looked like it was a real positive thing. And then the person was actually a very dark sorcerer who did this to many people, and that he was known as an entrapper by like high level teachers who came to me. It was actually, it happened to me, but it happened to others that had come to me later about this same individual who's like almost like a cult leader. And so they're actually Satanists in disguise, working as some kind of light guru, researcher, whatever. And then they entrap people who are just starting to awaken to things going on in their life. But it's like they always want to engineer them into a narrative or a cult or a handling that will keep them in a program somehow handled. And so once you find out, then they could start like more devious targeting to really try to keep you from becoming free, or they'll entrap you into making agreements through little rituals or a little this or that, which is like a tacit consent to join a group. And then that gets you under their spiritual control of deeper handling. And then, you know, only find out later, you know, in recovery. That's what I found out. I was actually shocked how much this takes place with people who are either these or their closet MK Ultra, MILAB, SSP, and they haven't awakened to their whole experience. And then when they start awakening, they might get involved in some kind of channeling group or a interest group or a truther group or a spiritual group or a Tibetan Buddhist like meditation tantra group. It could be anything. And then they'll be set up with somebody that actually keeps them handled. And they're using them as an asset. So you only find out about these things later. And I think that it is connected with some of these Luciferian groups and spin-off groups connected to sometimes a satanic group, like what you had.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Hey, Dean, do you have something you'd like to ask? Because I know this is your specialty here.
To ask, not so much because she's answering a lot of what I would ask about, but Eva's answering a lot of what I would ask about. But I can agree, Eve, that I've had experiences similar to what you talk about, as in I had an astral experience recently where there was somebody in Nathan's group that was there and I didn't know them, and then they approached everyone and then has, you know, quote unquote disappeared again. They're still in the group, but you know, I won't name them for this, you know, I don't like doing things like that unless I have permission or unless it's really, really important. Like, but yeah, so, and I was under the impression this was a trap of some sort, like an astral, because I was doing this person and I were doing something that I wouldn't normally do if I was conscious completely as well. And I remember just enough to know that it's just strange. I've experienced beings that were present in the space as well that were not your typical people, like they were pretending to be certain people.
Yeah.
And I could sense that it wasn't those specific people. It was someone else masquerading.
Wow.
And
That sounds
yeah.
like call it psychic spies who are hacking in your dream space to like spy or get information kind of thing.
Oh yeah, they appear as they appear as people that I guess I will I guess I'm okay to share this. It's just a bit much, but I've had a dream where Trump and his daughter came to me, and it wasn't them. I knew it wasn't them, and they tried the whole weird love bite thing, and I was conscious in this experience. I could sense it wasn't them, and on top of that, I was conscious enough to recognize and self-reflect and say, I, I don't have feelings for this person. I don't know what this is like. And then I woke up,
Wow.
and if
Yeah.
and I'm thinking some of these beings that do this are really stupid. Like they really count on you being unconscious and unable to control your actions, because as soon as I was aware, I knew immediately what was going on, and it didn't work because it was so nonsensical. It was so illogical. Um and then I've had this other experience. I've had a lot of these types of experiences, but some I remember more than others. And the one with this person in Nathan's group, um, I think I think something is going on in a similar situation to what you're explaining about, the whole handling subject, and some people that are even been tasked to try and handle others do not seem to have control themselves either
Yeah.
in some cases. And I believe this is the case with this individual. So I hope they actually respond and talk to Nathan and I, because this is exactly what we're uh, doing, as in like we are trying to get to the bottom of these things and help people understand more, including ourselves.
Yeah.
So uh, this is exactly why I'm not naming this person, because I would just like them to talk to us and get on top of it and understand what's happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, because there is some weird stuff going on with people like Nathan and I, like what you say, Eve, and it's very much interconnected with different people within the community.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I don't mean specifically Nathan's smaller community. I mean the broader community, the truth, UFO, spiritual, all that stuff mixed in community. Um, yeah, so thanks for sharing that information so far. Nathan's been telling me a lot about the whole love bite thing that you've had a focus on, and or if that's the correct way to
Yeah,
put
I
it.
mean, it's so funny. I think it's actually a guy from the Bay Area, San Francisco, who made up the term alien love bite, and it somehow stuck. And we just called it, the love bite or the alien love bite. And but Barbie actually called it, the alien engineered drama of the love obsession. And she would just go on with such colorful language about all the things that would happen. But you don't know until it happens to you, because the only reason why I wrote my book, actually, that's what motivated me to learn more, because it happened to me and I would have never known. But when I look back in hindsight, at the time, I was just finishing up like a master's degree, in counseling psychology. And I was doing not only learning about trauma and hypnotherapy, but doing my own lucid dreaming research, as well as doing, let's say, when you do self-hypnotic suggestions before you go to bed to have a lucid dream, or what I was trying to do was actually get to the alien abduction memories that were in amnesia, because I knew I had experiences, but I was one of these people where I just could not remember what happened, but I knew it happened to me. It was very frustrating. So I was aiming on doing this and literally going into lucid dreams and asking my own dream characters that were reflections of me to try to find out what happened in my past. And so as part of that, I think that as I got deeper, then that was like the time they would send in a love bite setup that really set me on a whole trajectory of the book and interviewing other people. And it kind of involved, it was more than just let's say on a lower level, it looks like it's an interference factor to try to handle you, to keep you from going deeper, to find out like deeper truths of what really happened in these alien abduction MILAB experiences. Like they want to keep a security lid on what's really going on so that we only remember what they want us, like controlled information, right? But on other transcendental levels, I learned from it on a spiritual level, like where I had past life memories come up regarding the person who was the first love bite set up, and doing more deeper research with my own trauma and, spiritual awakening, really. But it wouldn't necessarily happen for others. Sometimes it could just cause people to crumble and not be able to deal with it at all. But for me, it propelled me forward into a deeper recovery and a deeper reason to get to the root of what was really behind alien abduction, and especially the military abduction and the family systems that are connected to some military abduction involvement. And so my research went down other paths that I think other researchers, they just weren't making connections, or maybe didn't want to go there. And so it kind of went down somewhat of a dark discovery, where I discovered, the Freemason connection, sometimes satanic ritual abuse, definitely multi-generational trauma, sometimes sexual abuse. And now what I've found, I just call it a complex PTSD, multi-generational trauma that actually helps maintain this chaotic dissociation state that will enable easier abductions, or perhaps be the reason for some of it, because there's, like in a Freemason connection where you have occult family members that have made blood oaths to some of these entities, then that means any generation up to 4 generations, they have access to those bloodlines because of the spiritual contracts that were made. So if you're born under that, you could be under a spiritual law that they have access to you, and they have spiritual right to interfere in your life. And so I think some of the darker vampiristic entities that are like the controlling malevolent ETs are under some of these groups that are associated with what I'm calling the dark Luciferian satanic cabal groups. And that there is a connection with people who've had these experiences. When you look in their family history, you often see a connection. So that's not a very favorable thing to talk about, because in the early days, I mean, I'm sure Nathan, you ran into this already, and it was like, yeah, this happened like freaking 25 years ago, where people want to believe, oh, I'm a contactee, I'm spiritually wonderful, I'm an indigo child. Well, I'm here to help spiritually evolve, and I have a mission, or whatever. But then there's this hidden trauma that's going on at the same time, and people want the positive peer group that makes them feel special, and they finally found their tribe. But in reality, what's really underneath that, and can they really go deeper? And is it going to be different from what the group or the cult group or the current flavor of the week is that they want to believe? So what we found out was like, whoa, man, there's some like dark shit going on, and there's this alien love bite crap, and like there's MILABs, there's reptilians, there's underground bases. How come you're not talking about that?
I agree 110%. Yeah, sorry, continue.
No, but it's just, the history of how this all evolved. And we got a lot of negative, like what we would call it when we do a show, like me and James in our early days, we would do shows. We were talking about all kinds of shit, and he would go on reptilian stakeouts in the high desert of Southern California, and weird shit would happen. And then if we'd talk about it on the radio, then we'd get psychic attacks and reprisals that night, or, for a few days afterwards, or they get our family members, or maybe our spouse would, get in a fight with us, or we'd have like weird shit pop up in our dreams, or aliens would come in the house and mess with us because we talked on the show and said shit they didn't want us to talk about, or we'd get warned directly. Like I was warned directly. I was going to visit Barbara Bartholic many years ago while she was still alive, and go to Oklahoma, fly out to see her, to do some hypnotic regressions to find out what the hell happened, in my abductions, as well as in the alien love bite situation, because I knew the military were involved, or there was some involvement that I wanted to find out about. So they interfered in a military type of what I'm going to call it, a lucid dream hack abduction, where they were interrogating me and asking me questions, and and they didn't want me to talk about like the alien love bite thing, and just to, forget about it, don't talk about it, and then threatened me that they would do some bad things to me and my family if I went to visit Barbie. So I got sick and I was too sick to travel. And so they did interfere. So there was definite interference because they didn't want me to know, like, what was the depth of the involvement that was, the military and the human connection along with the aliens to set me up with somebody who basically was an alphabet soup agency connected person. So there's all this like nefarious, weird shit I think they don't want us to know. And they want us to know a certain narrative or believe a certain narrative about what it is. But if we find out too much that draws evidence of this other creepy stuff, then they're going to, try to prevent us from finding that out. And then they break up relationships too. I mean, that, and they would do that like before support group time. People would come. A lot of times they would have fights with their spouse before, or they get a flat tire and all the friggin' interference, or they come to the door, and when they're at the door, they're overcome with like nausea and they just feel like running away, or, and then one guy was like chased out by like a freaking helicopter that chased him like down the street after he left my group. And then the phone would go out for like a day and a half before the group, just weird shit, it was like, oh God, X-Files, So it just tells us, well, they obviously don't want us to talk about certain things or to discover the deeper stuff. So, but to say a little bit about what Dean was talking about with the, we call it the dream hack interference. I also experienced that where they send in like remote viewers. I actually had one last week, which was kind of interesting, asking questions about if I knew a particular person who I wasn't really. And then I'm like, get out of here, like get the hell out. And they'll come in and they'll ask, and they don't think that or they'll pretend that there's somebody else and that you're talking to somebody, and then ask you a bunch of questions. So they've been doing this for God knows how long. I mean, they have psychics who could do things like that. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So actually in my groups that I've been doing off and on for several years now, what we work on dream work, where if we can get lucid in our dreams and really assess the different archetypes and the language and the symbols and what happens in our dreams, then we can kind of discover getting just deeper facts about what's going on inside of our abduction and MILAB stuff, or programming or accessing, or these different beings, how they interact with us and how they shapeshift and all kinds of stuff,
Yeah, I just wanted to say this is basically a spiritual and information war. I mean, I'm one of the few people that I know. In fact, I don't know anybody else. Maybe you do, but I've actually got Rex Bear on a camera, actually going through when he's implanted, like it's basically an implanted dreamscape that's like well, you know what it is. It's a manipulated type of experience. And it was done to induce fear into him. Yeah. And it worked very well because right after that, I'd sent him a lot of emails explaining myself, but at the time I was pretty much controlled. I was thinking from, their parameters of my experience. So I had a completely false assumption of myself. But, and, here I thought, okay, this is my golden ticket for people to actually take me seriously. Because prior to that, I'd been trying to reach out since 2008. I contacted everybody I could that I found, except for, I think the only people I never contacted was Carrie Cassidy. And I was warned away from that because I was told they were being watched by the government by these ET contacts that I had. And then when I first told a friend about it, we went out for Chinese food and we came back to his house and I started a conversation while we're eating. And I never talked about it to anybody before. It was just like, this was the first time. So I just wanted to see how he would react. I thought he had an open mind, which he did. Problem was he got attacked when we got to his house.
Oh, wow.
Right in the middle of it, mid-sentence, he passes out in his chair, like literally just drops and goes like this.
Oh my God.
And
wow.
I said another line or two, and I'm like, okay, either I just put him asleep with the most craziest story I could possibly, that could possibly come out of my mouth, or there's something wrong here. So I stopped and I got up and I went to see if he was okay. And he came out of it and he goes, that was weird. He says, 1 minute I was here with you and the next minute I was in just a dark place and I wasn't really aware of myself. And then I said, well, I think it was them. I apologize. And so the next day I called him on the phone, and he said to me, he goes, it was really weird yesterday because I felt really exhausted. And the moment you walked out of the house, I felt instantly better. And I knew that was an energy drain. I explained that to him, but then afterward, he kind of slipped back into, the normal belief system that maybe he was tired, maybe he had high blood sugar or low blood sugar or something, but he would just kind of write it off and didn't want to face it. And I've seen that a lot with people who have had experiences indirectly around me.
Yes.
They won't admit to it. The other thing too, it's interesting, is the amount of pushback from this community that I've gotten, because not only so many of the things that you've talked about it have happened to me, but when you have somebody completely removed from you that you just sent an email to that had this big experience, and you put it out there and they don't want to talk to you, it's not just discouraging, but later you find out that there's something going on here that's at a subconscious level. They're applying types of thought forms to people.
Oh yeah.
Some of the people in this community I've found, or they're actually, they're MILAB victims themselves, but they're heavily controlled because they've got fractured soul fragments in these military programs. And you have some that are in favor of them going public and trying to get the truth out to some level or some degree. Then you have others who are completely adamantly opposed to it. And it's like a split personality scenario where you have multiple personalities pulling at one another inside the person. And you see the behaviors, because when you interact with them, sometimes they're completely normal and they're willing to talk with you, and they want to hear your story, maybe they want to help, but and then shortly after, something happens that you're not aware of. You don't see anything. You didn't, because afterwards you think, did I say something? Did I say too much? Did I say too little? Did I offend them?
They got punished.
And they just drop
other
it.
officers got punished and told them to stay away. Like we've had where people, like they're aliens or their handlers, or they would just have powerful things where, like, scary dreams that would scare them so much that they would never come back, or they do the 180. Sometimes they would say that they were warned not to talk to this particular researcher by, their alien handlers or in a dream. But to go back to, I remember somebody who was a very powerful, she was a Starfire person in a high-level Illuminati bloodline, and she had discovered that she had all these things going on in her life that they were always trying to handle her, but and she, like the super, I don't know what it is, but sometimes what they do is they literally can cause someone to black out, or to literally fall in a chair and go unconscious when you're talking to them. And those kind of things would happen to her so that she couldn't get support. So they could switch people on and off. And this is actually what happens this happened in abductions, where if they take you, like you could be with somebody in a group, and then they could switch off somebody in the group, and you could be trying to talk to them and they're like stuck in time and space. Right. And then so, like in my book, and I think it's in the second book, The Dark Side of Cupid, and it was actually one of the cases that Barbara Bartholick had shared with me back like near the year 2000. And I never used it in my first book, and I decided to use this case because this particular case had all the different things that would happen in a classic abduction case, but a lot of other things that people wouldn't necessarily connect. But the long story short, the point I want to make is that she was taken, let's say, on her way to work. And I think I don't know if it was a day or nighttime job, but she worked at like a convent Catholic school or something. And then on her way to work, she was taken, and it was like a good hour and a half, 2-hour abduction. And so when they brought her back, she was late for her job for like an hour and a half. So usually, like if you're late that long, like somebody notices if you come in late at work. Nobody noticed a thing. So they can control a whole group of people so that you can come home late from an abduction, be missing an hour and a half, and nobody knows. Nobody noticed.
Yeah, so, I wish I had that technology when I make appointments. It would be great.
Yeah. So I think the capabilities are much more than what, I don't know. I think it would scare people to know the ability for them to move in and out of time and do things in such a way that the normies, for example, who could be, you know, in and around an abductee, they won't notice a thing. And the real question, this is what Barbara Bartholick shared with me, is like, when you study this over a period of time, it's like almost everybody is affected by this phenomena. We think it's just, quote, the abductees or the contactees and the experiencers, but it's like almost everybody else really is affected by this phenomena, sometimes even more so than the ones having the experiences, because they're so unaware. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I agree.
So they're like, oh, really easy to manipulate and control.
Yeah,
Whereas the
absolutely.
abductees, at least we're aware and we know these things are happening, but it's disturbing to know that they could, you know, mess with a whole group of people and take you out and you remember something and nobody else in the room knows anything, you know?
Hmm.
And
You know,
so,
it's interesting because early on back, I would say it might have been around 2008. I was leaving a lot of YouTube comments and I was talking about these subjects. It was a variety of YouTube channels. And over the course of that, I got contacted by a guy named, I think his name was Rafael Rodriguez, if I'm not correct. I mean, it's been so long, I don't mind saying the name if that's even it, but it's pretty close. But he was an abductee, and he was connected to that psychologist Hopkins, the guy that wrote a few books back then, one of the abduction researchers who was doing not the past life regressions, but the abduction regressions. And they were personal friends. He lived in New York City. I talked to him for a bit. Actually, I think I still have his emails archived on my computer from that I've, you know, saved over the years from one account to another. And he talked about being literally just programmed to leave his house, and he's living in New York City. So he's living in, you know, like, I guess, a row house. They're all pretty close together. Broad daylight, was abducted by, you know, human looking ETs right in his front yard. And that
wow.
was another good example of it. And the abduction that I have some memory fragments of when I was 6, there was no missing time. And of course, there was no marks on me or anything like that. And I had a completely seamless screen memory where I experienced something very odd and then rode home and was scared to death at 6 years old and just went to the house and didn't talk about it. And years later, I just kept wondering why there were 6 or 7, I think it was 7 people that had navy blue hooded outfits on, navy blue pants. They were all exactly the same size, the same build, same clothing. I couldn't tell if the shoes were the same or not, but I noticed that the leg of that they had, you know, kind of like I guess you call them high water pants on. Because I
Oh,
noticed when
floods. We
one
used to call them
stepped,
floods way back in the old days.
yeah, it was like this skinny little ankle was there, you know, like right underneath it when they stepped, because they were standing around a fallen tree. And the one that stepped was the one that looked at me, and I saw half its face. And it looked like it had a ski mask on with a big almond shaped eye, and there was nothing behind it. I couldn't see skin or anything. It was just an empty void. And when I was riding up, I was trying not to look at these people because, you know, I was 6 years old. I'm a kid in the neighborhood, and this was a hangout spot, you know, for the teenagers. They used to hang out there and smoke pot, you know, drink beer and have a fire. They had a rope swing. So it was fall 1980. And I didn't want to make eye contact. But then as I got close, and in fact, you know, before I even made eye contact, I had that fear, that overwhelming sense of fear that built up, and then anxiety that goes with it. And then as soon as I looked at them, I noticed that they had the hoods up, but the ones that I could see a little bit, I saw all these white faces that I was thinking maybe they were ski masks, some kind of mask. But then later, as the fragments of the memory came out, these were tall grays that didn't have gray skin, had white chalky faces with large eyes and very little features besides for that, like very tiny nose, very small mouth. And instead of me, like, you know, seeing them and being like gripped in fear, because as soon as I saw that eye, the fear shot through my stomach, and then some kind of energy hit me in the back of my neck and rolled down my back, almost like a viscous feel to it, like it was fluid. And it just rolled down my back. And I just remember pedaling out of there as fast as I could. But then later, much later, just in the last year, it came to me that I actually came to a stop and stood, right, you know, straddled the bike, and my arms just fell to the sides, and I floated off with the bicycle separate from it up through the trees. And I saw this like a lavender color. It was, everything faded to a light blue. And I felt completely enveloped in this safe, like, energy feeling. It just felt really, really comfortable. and all my cares instantly melt away. There was no fear. It just turned it all off. The next piece I get is I'm floating back to the bicycle, and all these entities, these aliens are standing in a circle with their arms outstretched, kind of
Wow.
making like a circle with their arms, and there was a light above them, and that was in the clearing where the rope swing was. That's all I remember of that. But that came out after I did hypnosis, not in the hypnosis session, but afterward. I was just sitting right here at the desk when it hit me.
That's
And
amazing. Yeah.
and every time you have these, what I noticed about it is that they come back completely crystal clear. It's weird because you may not, like, I wear prescription lenses, so right now I don't have them in. Everything's a little bit out of focus. I'm kind of wondering if you remember things in 2020 all the time. I don't know if it's how this works, but back then I had 2020 vision, but I had these memories in 2020. I've had a memory of Egypt that was in 2020, and I didn't have glasses back then. So
Mhm.
it's odd how that kind of is, how you recall that.
Or
And
sometimes it's an altar that remembers it, that's on a parallel. It's so weird.
that
I've had
that
those
too,
things
right.
back, and it's like how could that have ever happened? It's like a parallel self timeline, but you know it and you remember it and happened, but then your regular self, like how could that have happened? It's almost like a split. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's the altar that remembers it, and it depends on how connected you are with the part that dissociated.
Mhm.
And sometimes it could be really clear, and other times it comes symbolically, and sometimes it's just emotional flashbacking. And it's not easy. Some people just sometimes their memories never return, but enough to know things have happened. So everybody's different, but I believe that we have to feel safe at some point for these things to come back, or that some of the programming is removed that's keep locking those memories in place, or locking in the amnesia. And
Yeah, yeah,
entities have like, I know that if there's entities attached to an altar, those entities, their job, sometimes it's a demonic entity that will keep the memory in amnesia. But when you do the spirit releasement, then that will release, and then the memory will surface. So sometimes that happens too.
Yeah, for
yeah.
me, silver cord attachments. Why don't you go ahead, Dean?
Oh, that's okay. I'll just be brief and I'll let you finish, Nathan. I just wanted to point out what Eve was saying towards the end there. Yeah, that's what I was taught to specialize in, Eve, which is to remove to clear blocks and negative charges and attachments. Um, and it has a big part in opening up the regression process of recovering the memories. And this is an important part I just wanted to say for everyone to listen to who is listening, that if you don't do those things, you can actually incorrectly remember. The block is, it's kind of like a malfunction. So it might maybe you'll remember a I'll use an example of somebody that we know closely, Nathan and I, that he introduced me to, who she's had a memory come through where she thought she was looking at a normal gun, and I had to take her very carefully through it without putting words in her mouth, because I could see psychically that she wasn't remembering correctly. So I had to guide her organically through it, and she realized it wasn't a gun. It wasn't a gun with bullets. It was actually a sound-based weapon.
Oh,
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that, and I'll let Nathan continue. But thanks for pointing that out, Eve, because yeah, that's exactly the kind of stuff that I do. That's what I specialize in at the moment.
yeah,
Yeah.
it takes work to do that. I mean, because not everybody can remember, and it's really getting people ready to remember and to feel safe, and to access the parts that we'll be able to know. Yeah.
Yeah. See,
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dean.
Oh, no, no, it's okay, Nathan. You go ahead. Actually, well, you know what? Actually, I will say one more thing since you've given me an opportunity. This is what happened with Nathan too, with the Orion stuff. As in, they had these memories uh mixed up with his real memories it wasn't just like an entire screen memory. It was literally like they had mixed his real memories with something so they could masquerade as his friends. And he does have friends out there, but these weren't these people that he was calling the engineers. They were these bad greys, bad, but they don't look like your typical greys. They kind of actually, from what I read, what I watched James Bartley talking about, he believes that they're reptilian grey hybrids, and I mean they do look kind of like greys, but then they have these claws for hands instead of like your typical humanoid human hands. Because you know how a lot of greys are described, like they have the rounded off appendages, like well the fingers. Yeah, these had actual long claws, but they were grey looking, and they had kind of like they almost look similar to have you heard
Yeah.
about that Brazil alien incident where the it looked like a grey, but it had so these bumps or horns on its head or whatever you'd want to call it,
Yeah,
and
that
then
was
they
the
had red
even
eyes.
that was the
Yeah,
even picture. And I don't know if you remember this. We discussed this way, way back. And I showed you some pictures of an African clawed frog that had
Mhm.
the claws on its webbed feet and the back legs.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
So it
because we
may
were
be part
discussing that.
maybe part amphibian too, or some mixture of all those genetics.
Yeah, we were discussing that maybe even the greys could be part amphibian related. Nathan and I, and he was talking about the grey frog. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Nathan. I forgot about that. So I'll give it back to you now. I've interjected enough.
Oh,
Um,
I just wanted to say that since I've been here, I had some issues in my stomach earlier, but they're messing with me. I mean, they're trying to get in and fool with my speech. They're messing with my throat. I've got this drip. I can't get rid of it. I keep drinking water. It's almost empty. And I'm sitting here, I'm trying to push energy through and I'm trying to relax myself to kind of get it out of me. So, if I stutter tonight or if I get hung up and I pause, that's what it is. And it happened last night a little bit, but I fought it off.
Yeah.
And last night I sat down, very important interview, and I had no water. So
Oh
I
no,
finally
I know.
forgot.
I
And it
have
was like,
to walk.
it's like
Wow.
2 hours.
But
And,
one
and
of the
we were
things
live.
that I wonder if Dean has heard of this. So I remember learning this from Stephanie Ralph, who was the one who did the initial hypnotic regressions and deprogramming of Michael Ralph, who was an early Mars record MILAB super soldier. And I don't remember if he had a 20 in back, but
Was he the first one to go public? Because I remember
yeah,
reading something
he
like
was
the
one of
that.
the
Mars
first
Records.
ones. Yeah, and I remember
Yeah.
having like conversations with her and then getting the whole transcript. And I interviewed him like years ago, but it was more on a written interview. But what she had found out in some of her deprogramming, and they were both Christian, but they used deliverance prayers to get rid of the demonic element that was like locking in some of the mind control and the booby trap programming. And so they found like all kinds of detailed, like triple layer booby trap programming. But she talked about the Wernicke area in the brain, and that when a lot of times programming is put in, even if it's just like regular family stuff, like a parent saying, well, you'll never amount to anything and blah, or whatever, like they're using the, I guess the grammatical term of the second person, you. So they will make commands of, you will not remember this. If you remember this, you will have something, and you will this, you are that. So they would give you commands in the area of the brain in the second person. So they address you as you. So when you want to deprogram, you must use that same term to yourself, or to deprogram what was put in the brain under the you. So instead of saying, I will feel relaxed, like positive comments, positive whatever, but you say, you will feel relaxed each time you do this, just use you instead of I. And so see how that works your own mind in terms of, because more often than not, these are booby trap things that will be put in subconsciously that get activated when you're too close to a memory, too close to the truth. Then they activate the booby trap programming. So when Stephanie Ralph, she used a one of those old fashioned Scientology biometers that would record the electrical I don't know how on the finger, like, so that you could tell if there was an electrical charge that was full. So if something had a lot of emotional content, it would record as having a lot of energy. And then when it was released, it would be like 0. So she was able to tell from this galvanic response thing that when the emotional energy of it was released, and then it no longer was in the body. And then you could remove like the booby trap programming. And then she did this for him. And that's how he got a lot of his memories. But he asserted, like, very strongly, probably against most of the opinions of the people who were coming forward in the community, that, you know, if you're not fighting demons, you're not fighting mind control. So he claimed that, you know, to do a deliverance first before you could even get through the MK Ultra and the booby trap stuff and all the other shit. And they were still accessing, because as long as you have an active altar that's being accessed, they can give you the command, that altar comes forth, you shift even during a sleep state, and then walk right on through a portal that opens up in your room. And then physically you leave through a portal in your bedroom. So you have to have that much awareness of aspects of your own self. And, you know, but I believe getting rid of the demonic and the entity aspect first, like clear that out first, like a broad spectrum antibiotic. Then all you have to deal with is your own programming and your own alters and dissociation. And it's really all about emotional charge. If we could release the emotional charge and the belief system and feel safe, then your higher self can guide you to whatever you need to remember or do or not do for your recovery process. So you can't force it. I mean, sometimes you want to know exactly what happened, but more often than not, your higher self will show you, no, this is what we need to see right now. And it just kind of unravels it like an onion, like layers, to go to what's the most important thing for your recovery. So the spirit really has to be in charge. That's my opinion. I don't know if this is what you found out, like, Dean.
No, you're absolutely right. I can give you an example of that. When I was under the hypnosis, you know, because James Rink, I contacted him because there was a conversation in Avalon that I was part of. And there was a person there, I don't remember their handle, but they said, you really need to check out James Rink. And he shared me a thread that he was on where he had like literally archived all of this information that, you know, James Rink had said over a series of years and interviews and things and podcasts and so forth. So I started going through it and I started looking at it. So I decided to contact him. And he had a period of lucidity where, you know, I didn't ask for anything. I just, you know, saying, this is what's going on with me. I shared, you know, the Rex Bear video. He got back with me and said, you know, I'd like to talk with you. Here's my phone number. I called him up and I had one hell of a time trying to talk to him because they were modulating the sound on the phone, where he actually had to go outside trying to get a signal, and it kept going up and down. And every time he would get to where some key point he was trying to make, the sound would go out. Yeah. So, and then, and then, you know, he offered to do a hypnosis session for free, which I was really surprised. And he actually wanted to get me on the show, is what it was. And he, you know, and I didn't have any memories that he actually wanted me to have more memories. So he wanted to try to help me with that. So in the middle of the hypnosis session, we kept hitting these brick walls. And at some point, I remember towards the end, this was after I had made the association with 20 years of a dream of an underground base, and made that connection with the lab at White Sands that I had the memory from. So because he had me there at the lab and I could see it clear for once. So we started to get somewhere. Now, before we even did this, you know, I had a discussion with my higher self, because my higher self activated just before I broke free and was giving me information to, you know, burn the cords and telling me what to do. And then actually coached me through it, as I had all this other psychic harassment from a super soldier, 2 reptilians, and a bunch of others that came and gone and had been coming and going for months. And just constant voices and personalities in my head presenting themselves as a mantid, a gray, this and that. And some of these were very, very human-like. And I think they were part of the military base personnel, because later they identified themselves as that. But so I made that association. That was the real breakthrough inside the hypnosis session. But we got to a point where he had asked me or I think he asked me, I forgot how he did it. I have it on video. I have to go back and look at it. But It was why I wasn't getting any more. And my higher self literally spoke to me, which had been happening before, and said that you got to get through the programming first. And there was a lot of programming. I had all of these preconceived notions, and they weren't really what it was is I had some core memories and I had some experiences, but I also had the ability to every day spend, because I was sick a lot because of them, that I had a lot of time on my hands. So I would literally sit and make contact with what I thought was this female entity, this Hajayan woman who was supposed to be my wife. And you know, the name was correct, but what was on the other end of that was either transdimensional AI, a gray, or something else that was you know, portraying this person. And they brought out the emotions. I had all these love emotions and this attachment, but I had no associative cognitive memories. They were all emotional based.
Okay.
And they used that as a wedge to get between my wife and I. And that was really, really bad. But a lot of that programming that I had was actually just verbal or telepathic discussions that painted a false picture. So when I would go into my past life, you know, memory of being in that lab, which at first looked like it was heaven because it was all in a white haze. And then eventually I had flashbacks that the haze started to fade. I could tell it was some kind of clinical setting, but that was it. And then later, you know, I associated the clinical setting with, in fact, a past life of a past extraterrestrial life. And I was given the whole kind of well, at first there was the theology with the cult that I was in, you know, which I'm not going to get into that, but later it just became your typical starseed experience. You're here in an engineered lifetime where, you know, we've actually woken you up and we're introducing people from your past that you've had trauma with, personal issues. And this is, of course, your spouse. They told me my spouse had, borderline personality disorder, which used to be a form of psychosis in the past. And, you know, before it became a personality disorder. And basically, yeah, I mean, so all the abuse that I was actually getting from these ETs, and it was physical and it was also emotional and psychological. You know, I was literally trained to lie to myself and to tell myself that this is a problem with my spouse and that I have to work with her, and because I love her and I want to be there for her to help her through this. And you know, I was in that email to Rex Bear where I literally explained, I said, they're able to do these therapies now because the paradigm's changed, the belief system is more modernized, so nobody's going to get burned at the stake. This is what they were telling me because of, you know, the religious belief systems. We couldn't do this before, but now we're going to be doing this with you and others in an engineered lifetime, where we're going to have this therapeutic interaction with these past existence loved ones that are still, you know, valid, still current, but you're going to have interaction with them now. And they were very abusive. I had two of them. I had a male that came through first. It was supposed to be Sherry Smith's husband. His name was Relakia. He went by a couple of other names, but identified himself eventually as Relakia. And so I was having communication with him, and so was she at the same time. And he was portraying himself as an abusive spouse, that he had murdered her in this past ET existence and was punished for it. It was in a mental health facility. And then they were doing the same thing with her. And then they literally orchestrated a scenario where her husband owed back child support from a relationship that he had some time ago. And he hadn't paid, and they gave him an extraordinarily long sentence, to the point where it would be kind of ridiculous to expect this man to pay any of the money back in any reasonable amount of time, because he had to serve like 1.5 years in prison, I think. And they told her, they said, your husband's going to be going away soon. And they literally told her that. And then as soon as she left and I came into the picture, and they literally isolated her at that point and gave her that whole love bite scenario with this individual. It wasn't until later that I figured out that we were talking to the same entity, because he started, I had the situation where I was in a state of meditation, and they pulled me out of the trance into a void. And I had these experiences before. They pull you into a void and you're communicating with somebody, but it's as if you're not you. they have control over you. So you're not going to have the presence of mind to remember to ask them the things that you were really upset about, you know, like the mistreatment, why am I being lied to, all these things. It was just like they sat me down and drugged me. And I was just there listening to everything this person said. And they gave me this long-winded speech, told me all these things. And then I came out of the experience, and I was laying in a reclining chair and that I bought for meditation. And I got out of it. And as soon as I came out of it, everything that was said to me, except for one little piece, I could literally see it in my mind. It was like an object that was going away in the darkness, and then it was gone, and I forgot it. It was literally taken from me. And this happened multiple times. It wasn't just with me. It was happening with other people in that Joy of Satan group at the time. And I brought it up to them because we formed a little subgroup that I was invited into. And I remember talking to this woman named Leslie, and she goes, "Oh, I hate when they do that."
Wow.
And then this other person named Scott that I know, they had done that to him, or they take the memory away. You know, like another experience you would have is you'd wake up in the morning and you'd just be barely awake, and you're in that twilight sleep kind of stage, and you realize you're talking with somebody, you're being programmed.
Oh, yeah, right.
I've had them where it starts as a dream, and then as you wake up, you realize it's not a dream. They're there controlling something and putting something in you. And I'm like, what is this? And they told me this is how we communicate, program your higher self, so we can subconsciously network you together and do all of these things for therapeutic purposes. And then it turned into some sort of life mission type thing with what's is when they were trying to keep me from waking up, and a part of me knew that I had to go public with this. So of course that meant going out and trying to talk with a speech impairment to express myself. And it took a while to get there because they were making me sick. I mean, I was given like fog in my brain. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't formulate sentences properly. When I tried to, it was all of these things. And they put me on this false kind of intentionally, with the intention to fail social media thing, and then lied to me and gave me false information during the presidential election, not this past one, before that. Actually, no, sorry, it was the 2020. And I was actually given false information about it and told and urged, like pushed hard to make a video to embarrass myself.
Wow.
And I know it's not proper to mention much and say people's names, but I have to bring this up because about a week after I did this, of course, there was all this, stuff talking about what's going to happen with the election and so forth. I found out that the storyline that I was given was the one that Charlie Ward had been pushing with Simon Parks. And I was just like, I think you're muted.
Oh, no, I'm not. But I was like, oops, no. But that reminds me of something that, and it's probably nothing new how they will engineer. Like I found out I knew somebody who was a MILAB where we were having joint experiences where we could like remember being in these astral spaces or wherever we were. And, we would remember basically things. And then sometimes I would get psychic reception of images and stuff. And I remember one of the things that I had gotten from, and I knew it was from the MILAB partner, which they try to do a love bite with, because then you get a telepathic link with. And that's part of the reason why they use people, is because they want to link you so you could telepathically communicate. And it's just weird shit. But long story short, I would receive these psychic impressions. And one of them happened to be like almost like a cartoon image in like real bold primary colors of like the Capitol building being bombed, And then I said, yeah, I saw this last night. Were you sending messages of like the Capitol building, like being bombed, like a paranoia, like, oh, this is going to happen, right? So if you were a psychic who thought you were getting psychic messages of the future and being warned about all these, events in history, you would just go and tell people, oh, this is what I see in the future, right? Oh, I'm getting these messages. But he was used as somebody to transmit psychic imagery of things so that other psychics would pick up and tell it as if it was true. So he was basically used to implant false or whatever psychic images in other people's minds who were already psychics and receptive, but they were doing this as a program. So it was like, thank God I didn't go and like tell everybody, oh, this is going to happen. I was like, this was kind of hokey. Like, did you send that message? And he admitted it because he remembered that he would send these messages to a whole bunch of people. And that was one of his jobs as a MILAB.
I was wondering, so my question then would be is, and I had this question earlier, you were talking about something similar to this, is what's the percentage, do you think, out of all of these people that this is happening to, they're being used that way, that they actually are in on it? Because you mentioned this is being done in satanic cults too. A lot of times, you know, I would assume, because I wasn't in a conventional satanic cult. It was Enki based. It was the Anunnaki. It was an Anunnaki cult, really, but it had there was positive goals, helping humanity. You know, humanity's been enslaved by these negative, actually it was like the renegade Anunnaki, and they became the angels. That was part of the theology. And so that was a little bit different, but in the normal satanic cults, they seem to be into some really bad stuff. So what do you think? I mean, how many of these people are really in on the full agenda? Do you think?
Well, I think many are not fully aware of the extent of how they might be misled by, let's say, psychic images or spirit guides, or maybe even memories. I mean, people can get false memories, but I think the ones who really know, like the high level, like bad kahunas, or like high level sorcerers, or people who are high up in the cult who know what they're doing, and then they're like handlers on a very high level. So, but most people, I think, are not aware, and they're just kind of caught up in, you know, maybe joining a spiritual group that seems like they have a positive goal, and they might be having somebody who's channeling a certain thing, and they believe it, and then they start having experiences. It's usually, I don't think they really know, but I think some people actually do. And in my experience, I mean, this was something that I haven't gone public because it was so scary, and the person's still alive, and I wouldn't name names. But it got to the point where I was being abducted in astral and other ways. And then when I would get lucid, I would ask this handler sorcerer, like, how come you're allowed to do this? How come you know this and you're allowed to be conscious? Like, usually they black you out and you can't remember. I'm like, how come you're allowed to be conscious of everything? How come you have such a high position? And he said, it's because I provided them with hundreds of Goyim souls. So he
Wow.
literally,
That's
and,
sick.
and I had an intervention from a high level spiritual teacher who helped me get out from under this, because he was trying to kill me. And it was a really horrible experience with all kinds of satanic and demonic shit. But he was known as, in the higher circles of the benevolent beings, that he was a spiritual entrapper. And so he would entrap many people who were just kind of wanting to learn different things, and they would get entrapped into his little culty belief system. And then I think there's many different cults and groups and belief systems that act as a type of capturing that will keep people from remembering, and it kind of deviates them from a true recovery process. So this is the danger of a lot of the, you know, popular narratives or culty things or channeled messages, that we have to be careful that, you know, if you know you've had experiences, it's good to do your own, you know, good old-fashioned trauma recovery. And really, I think you have to be so honest with yourself about wanting to know what the truth is, regardless of what you might be afraid of or what you want to feel special. You have to like really let go of all that, and then allow your spirit, the Holy Spirit or God, whatever, to guide you to whatever it is that you need to know. And then you will be shown. I believe that if you really want to know the truth, it will be shown to you. But I think many people get deviated into wanting to feel special, or, you know, get a bunch of YouTube hits, and they start a group or a channeler or a, you know, or a Charlie Word, for all we know. I mean, just using that as an example. But I think many people get deviated through deception, and then they're carrying out something that's actually capturing our attention and capturing and stalling the process of a true recovery and true sovereign realization that will free us from these influences. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Can you go, Dean? Because I got to clear out some crap in my head here. I had a great something I was going to talk about, and it's just, you know, something got in there.
Sure. Well,
I
I'm connecting to something that Nathan has been saying to me for a while now, actually, and that is kind of similar to what you were saying, Eve, where it's like these people they say this, that I get this and that for serving the system, and they, and they don't get bothered, they don't get attacked
Yes.
the way we do, and they also get a comfy life, and
They get
and
the oh
Yeah.
my God. You know that
but yeah,
it,
just the thing about
yeah, but that's go ahead. Yeah, because we've
oh,
seen that.
apologies.
That could be your new
Yeah.
book, The Alien Love Kiss, because it's a little bit better than The Bite. At
Yeah.
least at least in the beginning, it's like that, you know.
Because if you go along with it, sometimes, let's say people don't know, let's say they're following a particular spiritual ideology. And if they do all these particular things that, let's say, their spirit guides or ascended masters or whatever tell them to do, then they seem to like everything works fine. They're not a targeted individual, and they have a belief system that they're very spiritually evolved because they're doing everything that this particular spirit guide is telling them to do. And well, then, if these things are happening to you, there really must be something wrong with you, and you're just not spiritually evolved enough. You're basically spiritually retarded. But what's happening is, maybe they're given the box of goodies because they're following along with a nice deviated plan that's capturing people into a false narrative that keeps people from, let's say, the white checkerboard square Luciferians or whatever it is. So they get cushy lives, and it looks like everything's cool and groovy, and that they just do all their spiritual exercises. Everything turns out wonderful, and they look like, they're on top of the world. But I've had things where my spirit was showing me what was happening. I'm just going to tell you this as even maybe a metaphor, that what I think is happening, and this is why it's so important to have a direct connect with what I call your oversoul, your higher self, the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it, like the absolute truth, higher power, whatever you want to call it. That when you want that very, very, very bad, it finds a way to speak to you, and you will receive that truth. But if you're strongly identified with a false spiritual ideology or a very strong belief system, like a strong identification thing, or believing something that's false, that's actually a lie, it creates like this barrier between you and your higher self and the God or whatever. So that if your spirit's trying to speak to you, or God or the Holy Spirit, they can't hear it. It's like a plexiglass soundproof wall, or a iron wall, so they can't hear it. So your spirit could be screaming to you, but if you have these entities interfering and inserting themselves as your higher self or as your spirit guide, they prevent you from hearing the truth. And so their spirit may be screaming at them, but they don't hear it. And then you could see that's happening to them on a spiritual level. But if you would tell them that, they would think you're nuts, because their spirit guides are the only thing that's right, and they think they're enlightened. So this is the kind of thing that your spirit can show you, like, oh, well, this person, they've got an entity, and because they believe this strongly, I could see how they're literally blocked off from their spirit. And so this is what I believe, what Dr. Corrado Malanga of Italy, he did alien abduction research for like 30 years. Long story short, he found out that one of the problems with the malevolent aliens, who are the loose feeders, they will insert their consciousness, their self, and compromise our will from hearing our spirit, to impose their will through us, to live through us, so that we can't hear our higher self. So we have to basically take them out so that we hear our higher self, and we have this direct connect going on, and we reintegrate. And so, but they're very good at dulling our will in a way that's easy to not know that's what they're doing. And that's what's scary. I think that's a danger, if you ask me.
That's probably some of the worst of it, when they put you in that state where it's just, you either forget to do something that you can do for yourself to save yourself. I mean, they've gotten me with a lot of things, just everyday things that I can't do because they're interfering with me. And the aspect, well, what you're talking about, how they would come in and portray themselves as your higher self, I've had that multiple times after I broke free. Prior to that, it wasn't happening because I wasn't talking to my higher self, and I didn't even think I was talking to these ETs or AI. But I had with me, it was a little bit different as I came out of it, because there was something going on, some kind of arrangement to where, and it would, for me, it was explained that I was a prisoner, basically a prisoner of war in this conflict that's going on, and that I was allowed to have positive extraterrestrials. One was assigned to me, and the other two were family members. They came through, and they were communicating with me under controlled conditions, basically through an AI filter. So they would try to give me information that I needed in a subtle way to wake me up and to get me to realize what was going on. And as they would do that, they'd either get removed or the AI would kick in, and was literally like trying to talk on a cell phone.
Oh, wow.
It was like the NSA was cutting in between, but it was more of the reptilian version of the NSA, because they would say something to me and it would cut out and start breaking up, and they'd start complaining. I'm like, what is that? Why is it? This is telepathy. What's going on here? And they said, it's the AI interface that we've got to go through to get to you. And so I had that going on too, and it was very confusing. And they had this, and they were forced to, what it was before they were removed. I found out, and this is later, after accessing my higher self, because eventually when I broke free, there was to be no more ET contact at all. I was, pretty much self-sufficient there. And I was able to go through and remember all these different things, and then ask my higher self, and then get more of an answer about what was really going on. So there was an arrangement to where they were getting ready to they wanted to get rid of me in this military program, from what I understand. They had killed off all the altars, and they were keeping a clone or more than one clone at this White Sands underground facility. And I just recently remembered that this is actually called, it was a part of the program called Project Alpha, which deals with the creation, the genetic engineering, cloning, and basically, I got my son upstairs. I'm sorry. I apologize if anybody can hear that up there. He's having a video game meltdown up there and cursing. And he can't, his chair is rolling around like it's like a car on a road. But anyway, it was like it was basically, I was a POW, and one of the ETs before, right as he was removed, told me, he says, you are a POW. He goes, you are a prisoner. I said, I said, I feel like I'm a prisoner. He says, you are a prisoner. And then that was it. And he was out of the picture. But I had multiple ETs, and some of them would fill me in, and the main three were there to help me. And they allowed enough contact to where I really knew who they were for the first time. But the difference is that the way it was explained to me later, as I reviewed it over a period of months, was that they were only allowed to talk to me under the condition if they could talk me out of staying, to leave, to want to die and to want to exit here, because they wanted to get rid of me. They told me flat out, we don't want you here meddling in our affairs. And when I got interrogated by the corporal at White Sands, who identified himself as such, he could have been anybody, but I'm going to take him for what he said, is that they had used me in programs, and then I had basically I was engaging in violent acts of insubordination to where all of the cloned altars couldn't be used. And then I wound up in this program where I was literally shown my body laying on a gurney in the middle of a big room. My partner here saw it. My friend, who also came into the picture to help me, who's going to be joining the podcast eventually, I hope, just for at least maybe one more cameo appearance so we can all explain ourselves. She literally saw this, and she was the one that really snapped me out of it at first, because all of the work that my partner and I here had done, which was quite a bit. I mean, we would talk for 7 or 8 hours at a time, and he was using a technique where it was like very, very subtle nudging to get me to recognize things that he was sensing. Yeah. And I noticed that Lauda does that too. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about Lauda Leon. And she does a type of a similar thing, because we did that. She actually did that with me when I did my interview with her. I know you want to talk, Dean, so go ahead.
No, that's that
Sure.
actually that was I just wanted to say, yep, to back you up. Yeah, that's what I do, what I was explaining to Eve earlier. Yeah. It's a subtle form that I was taught this by my mentor, who I met through Project Avalon, just where I met Nathan. But I can't say her name because she wants to be private and things for the time being, because she's been in a lot of distress, and yeah. I
She's
don't
been
want to go
heard.
into too many details because it would explain, yeah, it would identify who I'm talking about. So yeah. But it's very interesting how effective this work is, because you honestly, like Eve, you go, I compare myself too much to other people, and I had to be reminded by a different mentor of mine who's also a psychic locally, that we will operate differently. And it just when I was observing the techniques, other techniques people use, but I noticed it wasn't as effective. I'm not referring to anyone specific, just there's just certain people um that use certain techniques, and it just doesn't seem to work. The person's still confused. Maybe they get a bit of help, but so I was taught by my mentor that the method that I've been shown, the techniques I've been shown, um it organically allows the person to come to a self-discovery, um, self-revelation. So, and then this is what happened with Nathan. He actually started to be able to navigate what was happening himself, to the point that I've barely had to do anything anymore. We bounce off of each other, and I help Nathan with certain discernments from time to time. I'm not perfect either. I don't know everything, but it's very interesting how effective this is, because Nathan was a very big case for me. I've helped other people with this before, Eve, and was so complex to me. I just thought, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this because I want to see how effective, how far this technique can take me. And I really, at first, I thought, maybe this is too much for me. Maybe I'm getting in over my head because I'm still on on an internship at the moment, um, Eve. And I thought, I've only been doing this for 6 years, and yeah, and it was incredible because it really did work on Nathan. He came back to me and he's told me all the correct things that, I was, you know, I know what to anticipate if somebody comes back to me with, the correct understanding of things. And yeah, he really did do it. And he just started freeing himself from the controls. And that's all I have to say at the moment. He's just done a really good job, and I've been working on this with somebody else that we know, that Nathan knows as well.
What's
That's in his group.
Does it have a name, the technique itself, or is it you just kind of use your own ability to tune in to see what they need and nudge them based on what you're seeing? And it's basically a remote viewing inside of them, so to speak. Kind of sort
Yeah, I,
yeah.
yeah, sorry, I should let you finish a bit there. But I got a bit excited because what it is it's a mixture of trauma incident reduction and typical, just subtle regression technique, but it incorporates the person that is applying this with the client, the individual. They are using themselves as a psychic conduit, so they can actually, so it does to a degree rely on the psychic ability of the individual. So I don't know if people think that's good news or bad news, because it's like people have varying abilities psychically, and I was pulled aside and trained because I didn't approach anyone. I was approached just out of nowhere, because it it was apparent that I have this potential to do this work. And so I do literally use my energy as a conduit, and I've tested it multiple times. It gives people a boost to be able to see clearly and to connect with their memories better. And I can actually peek into their memories with them as they're remembering. Like, I don't necessarily know what's going on with them until they start connecting with me and talking with me, and then all of a sudden it'll start coming through. and that's how I guide them, because I can see, because I've done so much clearing on myself, so much of this technique I've done on myself with my mentor, that I felt ready to assist others. And because you just have to be, you know, it's like you can't carry somebody up the stairs or down the stairs or wherever you're going to take them if you don't have the strength yourself. Um so once I was ready and trained enough, I started taking on these cases. And yeah, so I can peek in. And that's what I was talking about with this other individual, this close friend of Nathan and I's, where they thought they saw a gun, and I'm going, you know, I want you to look at that a little closer, because I think you might be confused. And I started to slowly nudging her without telling her what it was, slowly nudging her, and to see if it would just pop into her head, and it did. And she goes, "Wait, that's not a gun. That's not a gun with a bullet. That's some kind of a it's like a gun, but it uses frequency or
Yeah.
a sound energy, however you would want to put it."
Yeah. Well, that is a gift. Sometimes I get things in dreams, but they're not, I can't just do it at will. It's just, I'm get shown something and then I tell the person, but
Oh,
Yeah,
me
that's an
too.
interesting point. I wanted to
Me
ask
too.
you. One of the things that they did to me, and I don't know if it can't, I don't know if it's health related because I'm starting to have dreams again. But I think it's probably all the above. But for a long time, I didn't have any dreams, and a lot of it I attributed to having really bad sleep apnea. So once I got a CPAP machine, I thought I'd start having dreams again. It wasn't happening. It's only starting to happen sporadically now. Do you think that they are actually doing dream suppression to people, not just by causing health problems, but by actually doing something else? Because apparently, when they wanted me to have dreams, I'd have very lucid dreams. I had these dreams at this base for like close to 20 years. I kept finding myself in it no matter where I went. I'd have this dream that I'd go to a certain place, a cave, or maybe like a subway or anything underground. And I'd go downstairs and I'd find a door and open up, and there I was. And I'm in this base and I'm walking around looking for the ETs. I'm up in the ceiling. They had like metal framework, the installation of white sands has really big hallways and some small ones. And there was one that ended at a doorway there, and there was a cavern through the door. And when you went to the other side of it, there was a security camera like up in the rock pointed at you as you stood at the door. And then it was just a brand new looking painted door. And you walked through it and there was a base, just the end of a hallway at one point. And some of the walls were like natural rock wall color, and the others were completely processed or vitrified to some kind of technology that heats the rock to create the tunnel and so forth. But it all had this metal infrastructure in the top where they could run piping and whatever, electrical lines, whatever they needed to do, sprinklers and stuff. I don't know what was up there, but it was metal framework. I don't know if they have some newfangled way to put out a fire, but whatever it was, that they had to have that above. And there was no lights or anything. There was light, but I don't have any recollection of where it was coming from. So a lot of people talk about a diffused lighting. I can't 100% say that's the case. The other thing too I wanted to mention is that I was told to go into Project Avalon under negative ET, control to get help. And I won't go into the whole thing, but eventually the help that I got didn't work. And then later on, I was, I kept going back. I don't remember if I remembered that I need to keep going back, but I think there was at that point, I think some of the positive ones were coming into the picture and were helping to give me advice and stuff. Yeah, so I went back in and I started doing some videos, and I think I might have done one or two or three at that point. And that's where I met him. And it was an Avalon post. And there's a lot going on in Avalon, Project Avalon, that you don't know. And this is one of those stories. Unfortunately, it's not I've told this story, been in a group, not completely, but it would be nice if the people behind the group would kind of openly recognize that this stuff is going on. They tend to keep it kind of a bit of a it's as if they don't want to talk about or admit some of this stuff is going on. There's a bit of I don't know, resistance in there, some, you know, to some degree. And but yeah, there's a lot going on there. So I was able to get help that way. And they kind of networked me into a situation where, you know, I had 2 people here physically to help me. And I had 3 positive extraterrestrials coming through to help me as well. And through all of that, and because, you know, I was very tied into and in my intuition to some degree at the very core. I would say the rest of it was just interference, but at the very core, I knew what I needed to do. And I just kept following that. You know, no matter how bad it was, no matter how bad the abuse was, I knew that I had to see it through. There was light at the end of the tunnel, and I kept looking. Ultimately, you know, the major piece here was, you know, the God experiences that I had that really turned things around just before I burnt off those silver cords. Because when, I'm not going to name her name, but soon she'll hopefully be doing a podcast with it. But I was trying to send you a video of her that she didn't want out, you know, to the public. She said you can show it to researchers. But for some reason, I don't know if you ever got a chance to see that, because there was technical issues every time I tried to send you the link to the YouTube video. It was my psychic friend, and she had these. I had this attachment on my ankle that had been there for a while, and it was months, and it was just kept hurting and swelling, and I think it has to do with nanites and a psychic frequency or psychic energy attachment that was actually creating the whole problem. So I said, please look at my ankle, and you know, she finally got to it like a day or 2 later. And then she saw, and instead of just looking at my ankle, she saw me on that gurney in that room at the White Sands base with a bunch of other people. It was a big room and all these tables, and everyone had you know, there was a naked clone on every one of these tables. And there were workstations. And I had some kind of, I'm sorry, Dean, what?
I just wanted to tell you, the one I saw had a you know, those medical gowns on,
Yeah.
the ones where you see your butt flapping if it's
Right.
Anyway,
It's
sorry.
everybody's favorite.
Yeah. Sorry, continue, Nathan.
Well, anyway, yeah, well, they're going to be using stuff like that. I mean, I have a memory where they had Formica cabinets in one of the rooms. It looked very 70s, because it was at that point I identified as being 1973 before I was born, 72, 73, somewhere near.
Wow.
Because that's where, you know, the soul transference took place, which I'll explain in a moment. But yeah, there was all these tables, and I saw it too. And there was tall, you know, basically reptilian beings there with the wings, and I could see like just kind of come up with little hands at the top of the wings, look like something on like a,
Yeah.
like an evil monster type thing, where they were huge and big. And there was medical personnel there, and they were working on people, and they were doing things to these clones. And the clones were attached to what I call, well, you know, I had some attached to me, and everybody there had something attached to them, but they were actually attached by silver corded attachments. There was a life force cord that went in between my shoulder blades in the back. I was having heart failure problems off and on. They were controlling my autonomic nervous system, and they were causing all sorts of ridiculous symptoms that was very hard to diagnose, because it takes long to get into these centers to get a test done, because it's a rare condition. So, you know, I'd wait 6, 7, 8 months, and boom, I'd go for the test. And by then it was completely stopped. And then it would start again. I had 3 episodes of it, but there was a big silver cord in my chest. And then from there, it looked like maybe 100 or more little ones that were all over me. Like every square inch, I could see a silhouette of a male, like a translucent energy kind of form, with all of these silver cords coming off and just going off in all directions like a circus tent, but it just went into an abyss and 360 degrees out. And that's what I saw in myself. And my higher self was showing me that. I was actually seeing myself, and I was told what order to burn the cords off after I attempted to do it. And then they would reattach. So my higher self allowed me to do it for a few hours, and then started to show me. At which point, the following day, I had all of this psychic activity. I had 2 reptilians communicate with me. One tried to recruit me to be in a new age, you know, to be a new age influencer. And I told you about that.
Oh, God.
Literally promised me, like, everything will be better. I'm in a doctor's office. I'm in a cardiologist's office because the first doctor flat out refused to treat me from right away. It was like, why are you even here?
Oh,
I said, because my other doctor that I had a year ago when I had this problem was booked up for 3 months. And even though it seemed like, it was a big problem, they wanted me to wait 3 months, but you were open. He refused to do anything for me. So I had to leave and then basically go get another appointment about another 6 weeks or so later. I think it was 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm in the parking lot getting ready to go into this thing. And I start having this conversation with this smooth talking entity or individual that claimed that he was a reptilian. He wouldn't show me his face. He wouldn't show me anything about him, but and he just had this sinister energy about him. But it was more of a kind of a smooth, it was sinister based on the words, but I knew what he was and I knew what side it was. And at this point, I wasn't going to go for anything. But prior to that, I had a female basically, and I had this image in my head of a woman who was dark. I couldn't see the reptilian features, but she had a lab coat on, like a white lab coat. And I had this impression, a psychic impression that she was kneeling down next to my body and talking to me.
Oh.
And she said to me, she goes, I'm a program director of the planetary consciousness simulation, as you would call it, just using my terminology. And then she explains, I know you're not happy with what's been going on in your life and this program we have you in. I would like to offer you something different, because they didn't want to let me go. They wanted to utilize me. What this program was, from what I can gather, is that when they have their failed projects that don't work out, they don't follow orders, they kill other soldiers, whatever it is, whatever the scenario it is, the higher self breaks through and forces these alters to actually go against the program, sacrificing their self and doing as much damage as possible. And then they put them into this other program where they basically create, well, they have a clone of you already, because you have you have the person in society. And, that's like a petri dish for for further sampling if they need it. They can use you for genetic material. They can take you again, fracture your soul again, whatever they want to do with you. But you're on like a very short life cycle, because they keep you in society for a while, and then they get rid of you. They stop your heart. Maybe they give you cancer, whatever they do, but your life ends. And then you get recycled back into the system, and another placeholder goes into society to replace you. So they were basically taking they had a clone version of me that I understand was taken at age 6. That's where that started. And some of these memories of this base of actually being a child, walking around in a military base, and nobody would make eye contact with me. It was very weird, because it was like I'm walking around. I'm looking, this is the dream I'm in. This is the repetitive thing. I'm walking around in the space. I'm looking for the ETs. I don't see them, but I know they're there. And nobody makes eye contact with me. And I felt like I shouldn't be there, but at the same time, I felt like I belonged there. And this reptilian woman said something to me that really got me. She goes, "We raised you." And when I heard that, I actually felt it. It was an emotional thud in my chest. And I knew that it was true, that some aspect of me was raised from a child. It was probably the clone. That's all I can think of, is either that, or maybe there was another clone that was a child, but I knew there was definitely one taken at age 6. And I probably started at age 6, and they raised me in the program. And I had just remembered, it was an emotional memory, that it was like being institutionalized, because, and I spent like 5 months in a private psychiatric hospital when I was 15. I blew up mailboxes, and instead of going to like the big juvenile jail for a couple of months, my parents worked out a deal with the state where they would pay to send me there. So I was the only one there. Wasn't on any kind of medication. I never had any problems. People would go to the quiet room and so forth, and I was pretty cool. And I knew what it felt like. And as soon as I felt this, I knew what I was feeling. And I knew that when she said, "We raised you," I knew that I had relationships with this type of entity, these reptilians. And other staff too. It was like you would have the relationship with them. You would want them to be your parent. You'd want them to be nurturing. You'd want all these things, but you never would get it, only a little bit, only within the rules of the program. But at the same time, you always felt so empty with each and every one of these relationships, because they're only going to go so far. Just like when you're in a private hospital or a public hospital and you have staff members that you really form a relationship with and work with, and because they had this little thing, and every evening we would meet with one of the staff members and have like about an hour conversation about our day, what things were that were affecting us, our concerns and so forth. So you would make these connections. We all had our favorite staff member. Well, in this case, it felt like that. Like you don't have any parents, and you're in a place and it was so cold and depressing. That was that's what I got from my hypnosis session. I got this intense feeling of just, depression, isolation, just being underground, being just miserable. And so yeah, and then that happened, and then boom, it was like then I got the offer to be the social media influencer. They said you're going to be 20 years of good health. We're going to fix you up as best that we can. We're going to make you well off. He was pointing things around my house. Your house is decaying. It needs work, this and that. You've been too sick. We've done this and that to you. We're going to turn this around and you're going to work for us. And then it just went on. It was a 10-hour conversation that I stretched out from the cardiologist's office to late that night around 10, 11, and 12 o'clock when I finally told him to shove it, because he warned me. He says, I'm tired of you trying to pump me for information. And that's what I was doing. And I said, well, how do you know that I'm not going to accept your offer? And I kept doing that to him, and he didn't like it. So we go on a little bit more. I finally got to a point where I said, look, you're going to make me the social media influencer, right? That, so who else is doing this for you, and which one of them know who they're working for and what the agenda is? Because he admitted what the agenda was.
Yeah, that's the question. Do they really know?
Right.
They got the deal, right?
And I can't say, and I think I might have told you in an email, the one person that they identified as knowing is one of these people that has a lot of money in this community, is always asking for people to invest, very well off, bragging about his money, and is very popular. The thing is that I don't really know if this entity was telling me the truth about this person, but because that could just be a lie too. Yeah. And I don't even know if this offer was actually real and fully legitimate at all. I just know that if I took the offer, because my higher self popped up and said he's no good. And I said, I know he's no good, but I just want to talk to him for a while and see where it goes. So I'm having this conversation, and my higher self is popping up and saying things. And same thing when I had the interaction with the super soldier. He wanted to know who and what I was, even though he said he had my file. He read my extraterrestrial name. He talked about my past, and not my past life, but this one, and things that I did, things that I had to do in order to survive because of what they were doing to me and how the system cut me off, because I was literally cut off from the social safety net, as I was really targeted in every way possible. And he basically expressed his dislike for what I had to do to survive. And I said, if you didn't do this to me, I wouldn't have done any of those things. And he just brushed it off like, well, whatever. And then he got into telling me some other things. He said, if you answer 2 questions, I'll answer a few of yours. And but what was interesting is he was answering my questions, and he was describing things as if I knew what he was talking about. That was the difference. He didn't trust me. He thought I was being deceptive, and I didn't express that I didn't understand what he was saying. I was just listening and piecing it together in my mind. But I was listening to him, and he told me that we wanted to use you. You were like a shell of armor. You literally were a killing machine. You had absolutely no remorse. There was nothing going on inside you but the will to follow orders. That's what we wanted. But you've turned out to be a very dangerous and deceptive extraterrestrial. And he said, I'm sorry, Nathan, but you don't deserve to live.
Oh God.
And this is all. And then he shows me his house, and I think I sent you those photographs of that. Remember? Pretty sure I did. I don't know if I didn't, I apologize. I thought I did.
I got. I'm going to turn a light on. It's getting dark here. Hold on. But yeah, I got to wrap it up in a little bit. But yeah, I don't think I got those photos.
Maybe I'm gonna have to send them to you, because we've had them on one podcast so far, so yeah, I'll have to send this to you. But he said, I'm at White Sands. He showed me his house. He's like, this is my house.
Yeah, I never remember. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. A lot of times there's people who are but they don't really admit it, and it's hard to get evidence that. Well, I remember, like, I knew a gal who, well, James knew a gal who, she was a MILAB, and she had military, and she was in the Air Force, I think, too. So she was used within the Air Force also. So she would go to a VA hospital, but she would have regular MILAB experiences where they were doing doctor and medical things. And then she would see her VA doctor in her MILAB experiences doing medical things. So it was somebody who she could connect with the real world, who worked for the VA, who was in her MILAB experiences. And I've had others who had something like that, where, they noticed a doctor in the real world who was in the MILAB world too, who was actually a shape-shifting reptilian. And then there was one of the people, how when they give you an offer, like, if you stop doing your research, stop telling your story, well, we'll give you something to
I've had those.
And so what they did is they accidentally, like, put like $44,000 or whatever the unit of what it was for that country in her bank account, quote, on accident. So they were getting her to, like, well, if she didn't say anything about it and accepted it, it would be like consent of the deal. But she did not consent, said, hey, somebody accidentally put $44,000 in my bank account. And so she didn't accept it. So sometimes it's done that way too, I guess.
Yeah, I actually never had that happen, but I was promised these things. And, it was interesting thing is that right at the end is what he said to me, which still gets me today. Right at the end, he said, and this is the reptilian negotiator guy, Mr. Smooth, right? So Mr. Smooth says, I knew you weren't going to take our offer. You never took it before. And then he used, go F yourself. And he left. And, when I found out, I don't know the whole story. There's quite obviously a lot of it, but apparently, I've been in these scenarios for a very long time on this planet, over and over again, and that they knew me pretty well because I'm a troublemaker for them. And I come and I go, and this is what happens. I remember I've been in and out of the system, so I know it's possible through a soul rescue. I don't know if you can get out by yourself, but I know that that's how some of this works, because, that's, for the most part, that's what I remember. I haven't been here constantly for 1,000,000+ years or whatever it would be, suffering along with everybody else and stuck because I came in once and then got trapped and then was working with help from the outside. I also know that sometimes I've been here as a soul fragment to where I can continue my life elsewhere and then kind of like work through an avatar to accomplish something. And then, that avatar comes back to you. And then, from what it was explained to me, is you go into a facility and you reabsorb all of this, and if it's traumatic, you'll get it. They'll give you therapy, and you'll get it to, actually remember things in little pieces and work through it until you've absorbed all of it. That's one of the ways that was described. It's like when you go home, you're going to go to a facility for a little bit, and your family will be there with you. So that was something that
he mentioned, the whole soul trap, and knowing that, that it's a soul trap and the white light and everything. But it would be interesting to find out if they've done a remote viewing project on the MILAB projects, and like, how long do they entrap people, and who has gotten free, and how to really get free. Because a lot of people are, talking about that. And I've been studying, like, like the Taoist immortals, and who really ascended, and who are some of these, like, supernaturals that could get out of this system, and what did they do. And so it's still an ongoing study, like, who really can ascend and get out of here.
Yeah, there was a remote viewing group called Technical Intuition, and a few years back. Yeah, cool. I'm glad you do, because they had remote viewed something that Carrie Cassidy had some information on, and it was validation for her, and there was a little bit of talk about it in the overall community about it. But they did a really good one on this, and this is before Farsight did anything. And what they remote viewed is that after you die, you go to a point, you leave the planet, but you're close in the vicinity to it. You're within the magnetosphere, is what I understand. And there's a type of fracturing that goes on with your consciousness. It's like a mind block, basically. The Farsight Institute, when they remote viewed it, it was a high voltage shock, like a lightning bolt that would hit you and zap you. Now, technical intuition actually remote viewed a council that was in charge of this. And they said they were meeting in some kind of a mutual mind space or like a void of some kind. But they said they were very authoritarian, very arrogant. And they did
Wow.
acknowledge that they acknowledged them like they were a fly on the wall, basically, like you don't mean anything to us.
Wow.
Okay? We'll let you look, but that's it. You're not welcome here either.
Hmm.
And so yeah, they remote viewed that. I'm trying to think what other, I was going to make a point with this. They mentioned that they were actually visually seeing a piece of the person go away, and then the other one, almost like light being refracted, like if you were, and then sent back. So it was like the soul was sent back with a piece missing.
Oh, wow.
That would be, I guess, all of your memories, and that and any personality changes that you would have from that lifetime, because every lifetime has an effect on you. So it's like a layer. So it's like they're peeling a layer off and putting it into the cloud in a sense.
Wow.
But on the astral and its consciousness is just energy, we're only perceiving what we think is actual space between two things. So really it's just a block, but it's in a sense just a symbolic way in our consciousness of understanding what we're seeing. And it's, even though it has a visual component, an energetic component, that person really isn't split. It's just there's a division there that prevents them from accessing their who they were before in their past life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they were one of the first ones. And I was going to ask yesterday, I had a great question. Is because if you look at remote viewing from Ingo Swann to technical intuition to Farsight Institute, you see a progression of a veil that's thinning, what I would call the planetary consciousness simulation. And we talked about it actually. He mentioned yesterday, Dr. Courtney Brown mentioned yesterday that the good guys have a greater control over the solar system.
Yeah, that's what you mentioned.
Through my experiences, they identified to me that Saturn was the signal generating source and the rings were artificial. Right hemispheric remote viewing, which is another group in Northern California, had remote viewed, and this was in an interview that I saw years ago from the main guy that runs this, or the main, I don't know if he's still, I don't even know if they're still together anymore, but they used to go to the foot of Mount Shasta and remote view stuff. I think it's C SETI Ranch or E SETI Ranch. They worked with those guys. And they remote viewed the rings of Saturn and saw these large, like a drone vehicle that were making the rings. And it coincides with the Ringmakers of Saturn book.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
So, but anyway, I wanted to kind of lay this out because what we're seeing is now what he said is, the good guys have more control over the solar system. What I've gotten since I broke away from the cords is that the good side is controlling the signal generator that's creating this simulation. It keeps us it's like a psychic white noise type device. It makes psychic white noise, is the best way to put it. It drowns out the source consciousness, it basically drowns out our senses. So they're in this state of like a state of amnesia from that shocking technology that was remote viewed, but we're also getting everything else drowned out. So we can't, so it's like a computer cut from the network. And what you're seeing is a progression, because Ingo Swann was given a target to go and remote view a man after death his soul was traveling to the moon. And as he got closer and he kept following this person, this loudspeaker voice was saying, "You're not permitted to be here, go back." And it kept happening until it got loud where it hurt his ears and caused physical pain. And he had to come out of it and say, "I couldn't go any further." It was in, he wrote a book and that was in there. And now you got technical intuition seeing more of it, seeing a lot more of it. And then the Farsight Institute just they saw quite a bit. I mean, they drew it. They put, they did their marker boards and other things, and they did some very, I would say I don't know, I'm not seeing it, but very, very intricate. I'm sorry, what?
I would love to see the video on that study, because there's a lot of NDE studies, but they tend to, talk about the same thing. And there's a gal named Lalita Caroli, and she has a YouTube channel, but I don't know, somebody sent me her video and interviews, but she talks about that and how she went to the original dark void, and that this simulation of sorts is really the Metatronic cube of 12D. And so it's actually a finite universe. That's what's the recycling, even the planetary system. And I think she kind of correlates it with, I correlate it also with the Gnostic view in the Nag Hammadi library, for example, knew that there was a demiurge who was like the lower creator of the lower pleroma that included the cosmos, what they call the Hymarmene of fate, which is really like the astrological system. And so that's what our reality is. And then when we get out of it, we go to the upper pleroma, which is the original eternal beingness, which is totally unlike this recyclement program that's within this Metatronic business. So I don't know. I mean, it was interesting to hear a lot of experiences and how people kind of decoded what this is, and like how to get lucid enough to be able to go in and out of that. And, maybe there's some people who can, like advanced yogis, who really know how, like they could appear and disappear and emanate wherever they want to, and get to a place where they can get out of this. But I don't know, that's just still a good place to put your research, I suppose, and figure out how to do that.
I just remembered something while you're explaining things. Technical intuition saw something that was very, very important. And they actually saw people getting out. That's what I was going to say. And it's just like something is getting in my head and just like throwing up a brick wall. And it's like, I'm going and it's like, oh, what was that I was going to say? And then I got to retrack. They were seeing people getting pulled out. They saw two types of people. They saw the ones that were going up, ascending to a certain point above the earth, and then they were getting split. That's that fracturing process. And then that piece was taken away. And then the rest of the soul was just pointed right back down.
Wow.
And then they saw these others. And this is the part that Farsight didn't see. And it's a shame that Technical Intuition took down their videos years ago, because it was really important work that they did. They saw that there were others on the outside of this simulation, or this shields, weaponized magnetosphere, because when Farsight, when their remote viewers drew this shield around the earth, you could see the poles, north and south, and it was big holes. There was a hole here and a hole at the bottom, and it looked just like the magnetosphere. So they've obviously weaponized this and created a shield with these zapping devices that are out of they're just out of sync with our reality. They're in a different level. And you can pass through physical objects, you can shoot rockets and spacecraft, you can do all this stuff, but they're out of phase with this reality to a point where it's not a physical obstruction, even though there's technology there present. And what they were seeing is that there are small groups of entities that rescue people. They interrupt that recycling process and they get them out. And the majority gets stuck and stays. And, knowing at least a little bit about myself coming in and out of here, that's the only way that I think you can get out. And, people were always trying to say, okay, there's the West Penn papers, I think I've heard, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And I think there was some claim that there was tubes or something to get out. Well, if there's a lot of people getting out of here, then there's certainly, that can't be that, there must be a large influx coming in, because the population keeps getting really, really big. It just doesn't make sense. I think it's a small portion getting out and the majority stay. And then it just keeps getting bigger and bigger because more come in. And I was told in these programs that after the 12th week of conception, the soul was born, because that's when the brain activity begins. The mind becomes self-aware, or the fetus becomes some level self-aware, which creates a memory in the source consciousness. It's a memory of God, which is a soul. And then, they've got to put you in that body before then. If not, they've got to remove the unwanted consciousness has to be taken out, and the MILAB consciousness put in, or the soul fragment put in.
My goodness. I don't know. I think, well, I'm investigating a lot what's known in the satanic ritual abuse survivors with respect to, like Amanda Bai's research, and there's some others, but learning how they create the soul fragments and the original fracturing, and how they do it and take splits from the splits, and what that system is, so that you can reintegrate with your true spiritual essence and get out from that system, because it seems like it's controlled by the satanic stuff. But it seems like the Christians are the ones who get out of it through connecting with Christ and the Holy Spirit, and they're able to finally integrate and get out from under that. But it's still, not really well known in terms of this whole Metatronic cube thing, because I don't think many know about the simulation aspect unless you've really experienced it and you got out of it and then you realized what it is. So a lot to be known or researched, you know.
Well, it's obvious when you come in, they wipe you. I mean, you're not going to remember much of anything. I mean, my whole life was spent as a child wondering why other people weren't psychic. I was just focused on that. I'm like, why aren't other people psychic? And then I'd have these little experiences that I never really talked about. I had an experience with a haunting in my aunt's house, but I felt the energy, and I'm watching television, and the skeptics will tell you it doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. But I kept having these experiences. So I was wondering, and it was the subconscious mind, my higher self in there working through me to wake me up gradually, and just trying and pushing, just like that part of me had done in these military programs with these altars. So it was, and when ultimately what I found out is that was the entire plan from the beginning, to come in, get hijacked because of my soul energy signature, be put into the programs, be part of I don't know how many others there are, but I do know that those that come in here under those conditions for the purpose of sabotage are also supposed, if they can, wake up to take, the version of their self that's in society that's really under military custody, which is what I was, but I wasn't aware of it. And to wake that person up as well, that, version of herself up as well, to wake all of the altars up from start to finish, and render them completely useless for the program. And then
kill the clones and
yes, get the clones killed. But then, you go from there, and it's like, once I got to that point, it was just nonstop psychic attacks over and over again. The physical attacks really ramped up. So it wasn't just illnesses. Now it was a pretty impactful, attacks where I had literal tissue damage in my ankle, neurological pain all over the place, extreme fatigue. I have these things where they make you like an induced, like a trance. You literally feel so exhausted all of a sudden. It's like and they like to do it after you eat, because you'll think to yourself, oh, I just ate something, I must be drowsy, but not to the point where you can't get out of the chair. And, my son had come in many times with me, and like, I'd be blacked out in the chair. I would just sit there. And one night I took all this stuff out of the shed. It was like 1 o'clock, it's going to rain. And I had to clean up the shed. I took everything out, laid it on tarps, and I was organized. Went in, took a 15-minute break, and woke up. It was like 1:30 in the morning. The back door was open. Everything was wet, and it's just, and I was somewhere else. And that happened to me a couple of nights ago. I was here, and I got myself out of it. It was just for about an hour, I was in a dark place, and it just, no care in the world. It was just, I was there in a void, and I could feel the chair and stuff, but I had no inkling or no desire to get out of it, because they put that in you. They block that part of your mind.
I guess I know that the work of Dr. Corrado Malanga is real interesting, although most of it was in Italian, but he created methods where supposedly, like, if you were effective, you connect with your higher self, basically eternal now self, and then that self-awareness and willpower will remove all the entities and the implants. And then there's another part where you go and find the clones and you kill the clones, as long as you have the power of basically your higher self helping you. But that's a process that takes time, because they always try to come back and redo their stuff, and then this game goes on with interference. But theoretically, that was the whole thing, is if you could remove the alien implants and they're hijacking your energy system, and then basically go after the clones, kill the clones so they can't take that connection and access, because every time there's an altar or clone, they could re-access. That's the whole idea.
Right, exactly. Just like a silver cord reattaching to you as soon as you remove it. Now, one thing I wanted to mention, I had to give my partner a chance to talk. He hadn't said anything for a while. He's been down there in that still picture, lost in the abyss. But the really important part of this is when my other friend, who I spoke about earlier, when I asked her to help me with my ankle, she saw me in this room and so forth. She asked God for help at that point. And, she refers to God as the Holy Spirit, because, she goes to church and uses their lingo. So anyway, yeah, as soon as she did that, that's when she really saw not just the room. She literally got a full download and was on her cell phone sending me these repeated voice messages, like just totally beside herself, saying, "Oh my God, far out, Nate, look at what's going on." And she got a download of the entire scenario within a matter of, like, I don't know, 10, 15 or 20 minutes. They were just constant. It was a constant flow. And she would react and stop and process, and then, leave another voice message. And what she told me was, and this was the most important part of this, I think people need to hear this, is that it before she did this, early on when we first met, God had literally spoken to her and said, "I want you to bring him." I get upset when I talk about that. I get not upset to the point where I'm sad. I just get like an emotional wave comes over me. She was asked to bring me back to God. And then it was over a year later that when this things got really bad and we started to do a podcast together and I was getting attacked, that that at that point she had stopped doing the podcast with me and I was on my own for a bit and I needed her help. And that's when all that happened. And so ultimately the end result was I didn't get out of this by myself. So I'm sure there's got to be something missing in that person's story of how they got out on their own or broke away from this, but it took God. That was the major driving force. It took my friend here, Dean. It also took my other friend whose name I'll give out once she's ready to talk. And it took the help of those three other, what I identify as angelic extraterrestrials, because that's how it was identified to me through my higher self after they were gone. Oops.
Uh-oh.
I think we lost her. What happened?
Yeah, I don't know. That was different.
Oh, that sucks. She was looking at her computer like there was something going on, and then boop.
Well, I guess it's just you and me for the time being until hopefully she pops back in. I know she didn't have much longer, Nate, but
yeah, she signed out.
yeah.
It wasn't on purpose.
No, she wouldn't. Of course, yeah, she would have said something, but
That's a shame. Hopefully she
this is
pops back up before we
unexpected.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Oh, Eve, when you
what can-
watch
what can
this,
we-
there's got to be a part 2 now. There has to be a part 2 to this because we didn't get a chance to say goodbye.
I guess I can take this opportunity to talk to you, Nathan, while everyone's listening, and
Okay.
it's like it's pretty interesting what Eve is covering on her end of things, like the whole love bite thing, because I wanted to know what was going on with that weird interaction with people in different dream spaces or dreamscapes. Yeah, so she puts that together pretty nicely, Nathan. I mean, it makes complete sense to me because I'm aware when I'm in these spaces that it's been imposed on me and others.
She said her internet went out and Zoom crashed. I guess it went out. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I thought happened.
Well, that's interesting. Well, yeah, so is she reconnecting?
Well, let me see. Having a bit of a problem here. It's not. It isn't opening up. There it is. Let's see. That is weird because I had her and I'm not seeing. Let me see. Now she sent it on my private chat with her. Let me see. Can you log back in?
Yeah, well, this is unusual. This isn't unusual for
Not for us.
yeah.
Not for her either, obviously.
Yeah, for us, yeah, because something happened with Rob's stuff when we were on his show as well, didn't it? From memory.
Yeah, it happens every time. No, I can't get back in. All right. Well, for everybody listening, is there anything else you want to say, Dean, before we go? I just wanted to say Eve can't get back in. So maybe we'll do a part 2 at some point. I
Yeah.
know she wants to say goodbye to everybody, so I'm going to say goodbye for Eve. And if there's anything else that you want to add, Dean, please go ahead.
I guess since Eva is still spectating, observing from her end of things, I guess I want to say thank you to her for talking with us, and it's been a real pleasure in the sense that I didn't know much about her work, but you were telling me a lot about her work, Nate, and I started looking into it myself, and yeah, just the things that she's shared today really gave me some insight into some of my own experiences that I was pursuing and trying to understand. And yeah, thank you, Eve. And she's a lovely lady.
No, she's
She's got a
absolutely
really,
awesome.
yeah, and she has a nice presence about her too. She's very calming, and I like how she presents herself um both professionally but openly too, as in she's not afraid to say what she's feeling, or yeah, that's, sorry if I can't really articulate myself completely right now. I've been feeling a bit tired this morning, and yeah, I need to go take care of things myself. But yeah, thank you very much, Eve. And yeah, I actually look forward to talking to you again sometime about these things. I found it very interesting about the whole pleroma side of things that you're discussing, because I'm familiar with that. The lower pleroma is something that I is new to me, but I'm fully aware of the higher pleroma, because I am a Gnostic Christian,
Oh,
and I
I
do.
think, Dean, I wanted to interrupt you. I think the lower pleroma is the artificial AI matrix one that's out of sync with, the will of God, with the, just the, the natural order of things. That's how I've understood it from, from looking at what they call, what the concept is, which is still vague to me because I just found out about a little bit. I think it was in that video you sent me earlier or last night. I listened to that this morning. They were talking about
Yeah,
something like that. But yeah, I associate that with this artificial matrix to where we're supposed to be at a natural level here on this planet, and we're below that. Because if you think about it, what loving God would create a world like this, where when you die, your relatives, your loved ones, whoever they may be, are gone, and it appears like there's eternal separation. And all you have to look forward to is death, with the promise that something positive is on the other side, but you have no definitive proof. And everything is just in this kind of esoteric nature. It's just like, even when you think you've had a spiritual experience, because it isn't a norm in society or norm in reality for you, you second guess it. And over time, the effect fades off of you. It just fades away, and you're back to the normal way of thinking that everybody else is reinforcing.
yeah, I do agree with aspects of that for sure, like the AI related lower pleroma construct, but I think it's deeper than that, in the sense that um I think I think bad beings have hijacked this for a long time, the system on the earth. But I think there's a system on the earth that was already in place before it was hijacked, that does have it's a, like the Yuga cycle, where it's you've got these dark and these light periods. And I think people perceive this as like some people might perceive the cyclic periods as negative and positive, like, oh, bad things have to happen during the dark period. No, I don't see it that way. I think it's more of a dense period where you can potentially get stuck and unconscious, if you don't take the right precautions. It's really no different to, like, say, if a cataclysm occurs and you can either choose to put yourself in harm's way, or you can make the decision to be safe and safeguard yourself from the coming event, the cataclysm. And I think that's the kind of thing that's going on here, where the bad beings are utilizing a system that can potentially benefit them,
Oh,
potentially,
absolutely.
and
Oh, it
and it
does
is right
benefit
now. Yeah.
in many, many
And so
ways.
yeah.
Were you going
Oh,
to
what was
refer
that?
to? I said that they get something out of it in many, many ways. What I wanted to say is that you were referring to, I think you're getting ready to talk about a reset across the planet to where, and I've talked about this before, how they reset. It's just like when they do the mind wipe between lifetimes, they kind of just start you back over with a blank slate, like a completely clean, marker board or chalkboard to work from. So you've got nothing except for your first experience that you can remember in your new life after you're born. But they also do that to society. They do it, to the global civilization. They reboot it, and the act of creating a cataclysm, the aftermath of it, completely erases history. If it's bad enough, it completely erases all the technology. And if you look at the technology we have now, it wouldn't take much for it to all to crumble and completely fall apart. It's so very fragile. And of course, that's why, the government is keeping hush hush on archaeological finds, and they're constantly looking for things. There's rumors that they're in Antarctica looking for technology, looking for advanced civilizations and ancient civilizations, and of course not telling us anything about it. But it's just basically the scum of the earth that rises to the top, trying to get an edge on the rest of us. But yeah, they're wiping out our collective historical memory of self and our individual memory of self in order to preserve the continuity of this augmented reality system. I think Lauda Leon refers to as an augmented reality overlay. Pretty sure, but
Yeah.
So
Well, it matches with what Courtney Brown was talking about with you and Rob about
right.
the system that zaps you, and you see, I think that this is the thing. I think during the dense cycles, I think at the dense part of the Yuga cycle, um, I think you can get stuck here even without like the negative influence. That's what is portrayed anyway in the cuneiform that Matthew LaCroix and Gerald Clark were focused on. That and that Zachariah Sitchin discusses. I know Matthew doesn't agree that it's Zachariah's work is very accurate, but I actually think it's more accurate than he uh, has. His educated opinion reflects. I think, and my mentor agrees with me that I think there's aspects of his work that's very, very accurate, like more like 80% accurate. But Matthew's welcome to disagree with that. I mean, so he's doing a lot of good work. But I think that yeah, people definitely can get stuck here. The Anuna talk about getting stuck here themselves. They call themselves the ordainers of destiny. They even had instructions, as Gerald discussed, where they were able to leave here and get a body potentially elsewhere, implying that they actually, I think Gerald may have specifically implied that they would go back to their home. They had instructions on how to go back to their home planet if they died here and get a new body. And I've heard talk like that. I've actually heard that from my mentor, that there is a way to do things like that. And that's why I believe people are saying, they can leave here and, they're fed up here. But something just never sat right with me. It's almost like, well, if you can just go, then why not go? Why is this hesitation? People might say, oh, that's the programming keeping you here. I don't agree, because I'm very in tune with what feels right and what feels wrong. And I have no problem being open to everyone's perspective, yet I still get this bad feeling. And then I look at Gerald and I talk with him on the occasion on the other side, and it's like he's waiting for something exciting to happen, almost like we should be able to come and go, but we can't right now. There's something wrong. And because he understands in depth, he always explained how he understood in depth how to get past this system. And it's like, well, I get the strong impression when I can talk with him, that it wasn't as what he thought. Like, he is essentially right, but it's not currently like that. And he's waiting for it to change. Like, there's a paradigm shift coming where I think people have been stuck like this for a long time, and we're finally undoing whatever those mechanisms are that that Courtney Brown talks about. Yeah, that's zapping people and making them forget. I've talked with Gerald, and I'm convinced that he won't forget the next time he comes through. I think he's waiting because when he comes back, he won't forget, and then he can just go wherever he wants from then on. And I think that's yeah. So
either that or his home is elsewhere. But what I got from my higher self over and over again in the past few months, I say the past two, is that, because I've been dealing with these attacks and these health problems and everything else and the financial issues, and there's a coming economic collapse coming, and looking at all the difficulties of being able to stay here. And, just going over this to my mind, and I'm getting from my higher self, is that, if you die before the time that, this event happens, which is not just in, we talked about it yesterday too, because I asked a question on behalf of one of the people that was in the chat, to Dr. Courtney Brown, about this event that's supposed to happen. And of course, you have these people that are mind controlled that are telling you that there's going to be a solar maximum that's going to change everything, or there's something else will happen, and we're going to be in 5D. So I don't know if that person was referring to that specifically, or maybe they've seen something that I've said. But yeah, there is definitely going to be an event, but there's going to be a series of events. It's a process. So it's not going to be just one thing that happens and then we're all free. It couldn't even do that if you wanted to, because you've got people who can't remember who they've ever been, and suddenly they're all going to remember all of it. Can you imagine dealing with that? I don't think anybody
yeah,
can deal with it. It's
I don't think
impossible.
it's going to happen that way. I think
It has
there's a
to be
process of recovery. Yeah.
exactly. And that's how it was explained to me, but it was also said too. I said, well, what if I die? And then I was told that you're going to be here no matter what until we're finished. So, and I said, why? And I was told, this is yesterday. We need you on the inside.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. So that's definitely, well, that's true. I mean, that's why people come and help, because well, it's one of those situations where it's like, are you just going to leave people like this? I mean, essentially, if you understand the stuff that Courtney Brown was talking about again, about ISBs, and about we essentially enrich each other, and it's like you know it's no different to how you look at when we go around in the wild and you see a wounded animal. It's like, a lot of people, there's potentially danger there, but they don't just, there's people that just don't leave them. Still, they still help them. And it's really a similar analogy to when beings come to certain worlds to undo a mess, because it's like, well, why do you want to leave the mess as it is? I mean, it's potentially I don't mean to sound like this, but it's potentially a problem for them as well.
Oh yeah,
It's
absolutely. But there's one aspect I left out though. There's a greater context of it, because the context that I was making this argument in was that, because it was explained to me there's going to be things going on the outside of the simulation as well, a struggle outside and a struggle inside. So my idea, my argument was, well, if things don't work out, why can't I be on the outside struggle, where I have the option to go when I'm done, or to go no matter what, and whatever the case is, I feel better on the outside of this than being on the inside. And that's when I was told, we need you on the inside, not on the outside. Now, if they were to get you and kill you, and then, because they've threatened to do this to me, 3 times now, they said, we're going to, prior to that, they asked me to leave voluntarily. I'm like, what do you think I'm going to do? I said, you're asking me to commit suicide? I think I'm not doing that to my family. Like, no, just make yourself die and leave. We don't want you here anymore. We'll make sure the door opens wide for you. They didn't say it like that, but they made it quite clear. And then later, the last 3 threats that I had gotten, first 2, it seemed like it was AI, and I had asked, and it was admittedly AI. It felt like it. The last one was an entity, and they all said the same thing. They said, we think we can kill you. Well, we think we can eventually kill you. They didn't say how, but it's obvious what it is, just constantly wearing you down until they can get into you enough to shut your heart down or something else or give you cancer. But yeah,
Yeah.
what they were saying is that we think we can trap your soul after death. After we finish you off physically, we can trap your soul and eject you from here. That's what they told me they were going to do. And kind of gave me like a win-win situation, because it was either way, I'm getting out of here. So, you know, I'll fight you to the end, but if you win, at least I'm not here. At least I'm being
Yeah.
kicked out. That's how I was looking at it. But it was
Yeah.
made
Well,
quite
that's
clear that if that did happen to me, the goal would be to avoid being captured and to stay and hide in the system by masking myself until it was ready the time to act
well, I will share
in
this with
a collective operation.
Yeah. Is this working, by the way? Can you hear me? Because I
Yeah,
swear it's not
everything
showing
seems
up.
what's not showing up. I can hear you and I can see your picture.
When Eve was in here, it was flashing when I was talking. It's not doing it now, but as long as you can hear me, that's fine. I mean,
Yeah, they
but
didn't like Eve talking. I think they had enough of her. They're like, that's it, cut her mic, cut her feed, you know, we got to get her out of here. She's going to reveal
yeah.
where, you know, the pot of gold is for us.
Yeah, well, I think collectively, I'm really glad we're connecting with other people, Nate, because we can get the picture much clearer if we all work together, because it's just impossible to know everything on your own. We all exist for a reason. We all have a variable, a varied aspect to us that's unique. And the more we interact with people like Eve and um Rob and Courtney Brown, and it's just really piecing together the picture, the bigger picture, which I had a strong inkling about anyway, but I want to do the work right. I want to interact with everyone and get really solid information. And like what Courtney is doing, discussing with you guys the other day, that's incredible. Like I already knew you could see that stuff with that kind of technology he was talking about, but for him to actually further emphasize that they're everywhere and anyone can do it at any time, I had that impression already, but he's further confirming it, and he's doing the actual work and showing you can just get, like, yeah, just go and look around, just go and look around. Anyone can see them. Um, and
And that's now because the technology is more available. Back then, I mentioned Jose Escamilla was the first one that I had seen over 20 years ago who did it with the old VHS camcorders, and they had a night shot feature, and they would send it off to somebody like a CB radio repairman type scenario, and they would rig it up to where the night shot would come on automatically no matter what. So the camera was just shooting apparently in infrared. And they were filming this stuff too. They were doing rods and also spacecraft. And they said you can literally see these things in broad daylight, and nobody else, and because they're in a different light spectrum, they're putting out heat, but they're not putting out anything else. And
yeah.
and then it just faded after that. It was like after he did it, it was just it faded. And but what the Farsight Institute is doing is it's extremely important. And something tells me, Dean, that it'll be a cold day in hell when Steve Cambion puts him on to show that footage.
I mean, yeah, I don't know what Stephen thinks of all that, but I think he'd be I mean, he is an evidence-based guy, so it would be interesting to see his perceptions of I haven't seen all of Stephen's videos, but it would be interesting to see what he thinks of the whole infrared technology aspect of it, because I haven't personally tried it myself yet, but I fully believe it works, and I fully another interesting story is about this story called Project Chameleon. And this guy that worked for the military, he was actually a drug trafficker. He was let go from the military. I think he was let go. I don't quote me on that, but I don't think he quit on his own accord necessarily. But he stole infrared like goggles, like night vision, whatever you want to call it, goggles from them, because he figured out it's not just UFOs that are, that are operating on a different spectrum so you can't see them. It's also people. There are people, apparently, according to his understanding, in the military or in Black Ops that are using some kind of phase technology where I don't think it's just that they're visibly invisible, like, to the naked eye. I think they literally can phase. They phase out of into a certain dimensional space, so you can't see them with the naked eye, but they also can, go through certain. I could be, again, don't quote me on this. Project Chameleon, go look into it yourself if anyone's
Yeah,
listening.
I haven't heard of it. Thank you for telling me.
Yeah, there's a book about it. I think it was talked about on Project Avalon, actually, Nathan, and that's where I got it from. There's this guy that actually was a counselor who witnessed the weird behavior around this guy specifically and was documenting it and backing him up. And it's like, this guy's getting gang stalked. These people are all parking in an alleyway outside of his apartment, and then just all at the same time, and then just all walking off, and then all coming back and leaving at the same time, or they'd go into a diner or cafe where he was and just pretend like they're just all there for whatever reason and just make him feel crazy, And, like, they wouldn't interact with him except one time. Apparently this counselor or something actually witnessed this somebody come to this individual and say, if you just give back the stuff that you stole, like the goggles, all that stuff that he stole, it'll all go away. This person actually witnessed someone saying this to him, and that was interesting. And that's all I really remember about that. But it's like, yeah, he was able to, I think, from what I am understanding, he was able to see some of these people that are gang stalking him are using technology to be literally invisible as well. Not just visibly gang stalk him, like invisibly do weird shit. And I think that's why he stole these goggles, because he wanted to be able to see them, or he wanted to expose to people that these people are walking around. So just, I actually wanted to give people a warning, like, because I think this stuff is really real. And I think that if you're going to look at UFOs, just be prepared for other things that you might see that might, yeah, I don't want to deter anyone from doing it. Go have a look if you want, go try it. I'm curious. But it's yeah, just be warned that from what I've read, you may see other things too. Other people walking around, or maybe not even people, floating around.
Yeah, I have to I set up the opportunity to email, Corey, actually Courtney. I'm not gonna that was a Freudian slip, I guess, man. I'm not going to be contacting a guy named Corey. I'll be contacting a man named Courtney. So, but,
Right.
but, but anyway, yeah, I need to run that by him when I do send him an email. So,
Yeah.
have you used this instead of pointing it just up at the sky? Have you used it around in your environment to see what might pop up? It reminds me of the movie They Live, where you had to put on the glasses in order to see the
Yeah,
aliens.
exactly.
They're
Exactly. I'm glad you brought it up, Nathan, because I'd love for you to ask him, because I haven't finished watching that thing with you and Rob and Courtney yet. I'm halfway through, and I have no idea if he'd brought it up or not. So you're implying that he hasn't really addressed that side of it yet. So it'd be really great to
no,
see what he has to say about it.
I mean, other than pointing it around, I mean, maybe to see if they can see a heat source. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know, but I mean, they have infrared cameras. So that's the thing. It's like,
Yeah.
what's the difference between the thermal imaging camera, which if I had full presence of mind, I could have asked that. What's the difference between like what they call it, a flare camera? It's FLIR. They used it
Oh, the
for
FLIR.
yeah, they use it to enforce marijuana laws by looking for heat sources for, from a grow room, or it usually turns out to be a dryer vent and a house gets raided. But heat coming out of a chimney or something. But yeah, they use it for that. I mean, that's a thermal imaging camera. They also use it, they have thermographers, and sometimes they work for the police or military. but also too, they also work for home contractors and insulation companies because they do a thermal sweep of your house to look for where there's heat loss. So, but the images that I saw that, from yesterday didn't look like the flare camera, where everything's kind of looking like, it's like the movie The Predator, where everything's distorted, and that sight that they would switch to, like seeing through the eyes of the predator. It was just almost like a video game, like a really poor, it was just very distorted. It wasn't, true colors and a full clear image. But what we were seeing with their stuff in the skies was very, very clear.
Yeah.
So it's a bit different. So there's a difference there. I don't know what the difference is. I wish I remembered to ask that, because he would have, he knew everything else. I'm certain he would have knew exactly how to answer that question. I guess it's just a different spectrum of IR. And I
Yeah,
know,
there
I know
certainly
light's
is,
a
'cause
spectrum, and there's a
I have a
range of
friend.
frequency.
Yeah, I have a friend that was in the military who just got out not too long ago that was talking to me about the different technologies, visual spectrum technologies, and yeah, some use thermal signatures, some use you know, it's
A
just
wavelength
using,
of light.
yeah, wavelength of light. Yeah, thank you, Nathan.
Because I know that
But
from LED lighting, there are LEDs that produce IR specifically, and for flowering cycles and stuff like that. Right at the sunset, there's an increased IR, infrared output of the sun. So the harvest sun puts out more IR than, say, like the spring or summer sun. So when you add the IR into a photo spectrum, you can actually shorten the flowering cycle of certain annual plants, because it just has that effect. I don't know if you're shortening the cycle. I think when you're force flowering and then you're shortening the cycle artificially, you're getting that. But I don't think it's actually changing the natural cycle of the plant. I think it's just it's speeding it up because there's different factors there. But it doesn't
mm,
work that way out there in nature. It's just part of the natural environment. So you're just kind of using the plant's physiological responses to the environment, to create a hormonal response inside. Like I was talking to you about the hydrodynamic friction effect from months ago with soil erosion, how to root a stem cutting with applied hydrodynamic friction that mimics soil erosion at the root zone. What you're doing is you're basically using natural laws, things that are innate in the functionality of an organism, and you're using it to your advantage. So you're just kind of modifying the conditions to get that response out of it. But you're not changing nature. You can't do that. When you do that, you get something like, Bill Gates would give you. So you don't want that.
right. Yeah, so that would be very interesting for him to address, Courtney Brown. Yeah, so uh what else do I have to say? Not much. I think I'm getting tired myself.
Oh, I'm beat. I
So
think we ought to wrap this up and say goodbye to everybody. And then if you want to chat after this, we can for a few minutes. So I think that's what we ought to do. Are you ready to say goodbye? And I just wanted to say for everybody out there who's watching this, once we upload it, thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate your support of this channel. And we want to thank Eve Lorgen for her amazing contribution tonight. She was just absolutely perfect. And unfortunately, her internet went down. So, but for the most part, we got mostly what we needed. I think we had a really good show tonight. And I hope to get her on again. I'm pretty sure she will come on again. And I just wanted to mention one thing. If you remember when we first started, I think we were off camera when she said it. So how long do you want to go? So let's try 90 minutes. She's like, oh, I guess we could do that. Well, we went over 90 minutes, and and I think she'd probably still be talking to us if her feed didn't go out, which tells us that we're really good hosts and we have a lot to offer, and we can engage the person we're interviewing with a similar knowledge base, which keeps them interested and keeps them going. And we feed off our energy really well because, we all keep each other awake like we're doing right now. So this isn't a boring, this conversation is very good, and it's a very, very good vibe. And I'm very happy about that.
right, I agree. Yeah, so thanks for all that, Nate. And yeah, so uh I've been in and out during this one, so I've been very tired. I don't know, I just woke up and I just started getting very tired quickly. yeah, once I started talking with you guys. So I hope I've made sense
No,
as
you
best
made
as I
perfect
can. Yeah.
sense. Let's just kill this dragon and move on. So we'll see you guys next time. And thank you for being part of this project. Take care
No
and
worries.
good night or good day.